Chapter 2785. Chen Zong challenged the number 1 on Sir God Destroying King. Although some people had expected it, they were still shocked when it happened. God Destroying King. The number 1 on Sir God Destroying King. For 100 years, many people had coveted his position and challenged him. However, he had never been shaken. God Tiangang couldn't do it. God Tianmu couldn't do it either. As for the others, they couldn't do it either. When Chen Zong saw God Destroying King, he was stunned. God Destroying King was actually a young lady. A young lady who looked like she was in her teens. It was hard to imagine and believe. It was hard to associate such a young lady with the word destruction. Especially the young lady's hair, which was in 2 cute buns. Coupled with her delicate face, she was very cute, and it was hard to imagine. God Destroying King? Cute young lady? They didn't seem to be related. However, that was the case. The young lady who looked cute was the number 1 on Sir God Destroying King. She was the unshakable number 1 on Sir God Destroying King. God Destroying King also had an innate divine body. Moreover, it was the top innate divine body, destruction divine body. It was a top divine body that wasn't inferior to reincarnation divine body. Moreover, she had developed a lot of potential in destruction divine body, and it was better than reincarnation divine body. Because of that, God Destroying King was the number 1 on Sir God Destroying King. She was the irreplaceable number 1. Chen Zong didn't belittle God Destroying King just because she looked like a young lady. That didn't exist. The appearance of a young lady was just a facade. Thinking about it, God Destroying King had occupied the number 1 position on Sir God Destroying King for more than 100 years. In other words, she wasn't young. She was at least 100 years old, or even 200 years old. A young lady who was a few hundred years old. If he were to let his guard down just because she looked cute, the consequences would be terrible. God Destroying King grabbed with both hands. Suddenly, 2 huge hammers appeared. The handles of the hammers were 1 meter long, and the pumpkin-shaped hammers were huge. They had a diameter of half a meter, and they looked terrifying. When the twin hammers appeared in her hands, the God Destroying King's cute little face suddenly revealed a tinge of madness. When such madness appeared on the face of a young girl, there was an indescribable strangeness. With a bang, the God Destroying King's hammers collided, and it gave off a shocking sound. The sound waves spread out and shook the surroundings. The shocking momentum was mighty, and it was as though it could shatter everything. "Take my hammer!" The God Destroying King's voice could be heard clearly. However, it contained a frightening power. With a flash of his body, he was like a tiger leaping into the air. His speed was frightening, and he pounced on Chen Zong directly. The huge hammer in his hand carried a frightening power. It was extremely ferocious, and it struck Chen Zong directly. Quick! The God Destroying King's speed was extremely fast. However, what was more frightening was not her speed but her power. Her extremely fierce power and willpower that could destroy everything. That was the destruction divine power that the destruction divine body possessed. The divine body of destruction grasped the divine power of destruction and comprehended the Tao of destruction. Its power was extremely terrifying and shocking, capable of destroying everything. When the destruction divine power, destruction doctrine, and destruction divine decree combined, it created the God Destroying King's terrifying power. It was extremely shocking. The hammer made Chen Zong feel suffocated. It was as though he was going to be smashed into pieces. Strong. It was simply unreasonably strong. Compared to God Tiangong's explosive attack, it was not any weaker. The sword was unsheathed, and it instantly slashed with an extremely fierce power. The stroke was the World Sword Principle. The World Sword Principle that had merged with the Tai Dragon Sword Principle became even more overbearing and vigorous. It was filled with shocking power, and it was most suitable for head-on attacks and collisions. On top of that, Chen Zong had mastered the silver sword body, and his power was extremely strong. He was comparable to an ordinary fifth-realm body cultivator. In a head-on collision, Chen Zong was not afraid at all. However, at the moment when the sword and the hammer came into contact, Chen Zong's expression changed. Strong. The power that the hammer contained was extremely terrifying. It was as though it could destroy everything in its path. The sword light shattered and the power that the return moon sword carried seemed to have dispersed. Even the return moon sword gave out a sword chime as though it could not bear the burden. Such power shocked Chen Zong. The god-destroying king lived up to her name. Such divine power was too shocking. Retreat. With the hammer, Chen Zong was pushed back and he flew back dozens of meters in an instant. However, Chen Zong's power was not weak either. The power of the sword was also very strong. It blocked the god-destroying king's hammer attack, and pushed the god-destroying king back dozens of meters. God-destroying king's face was filled with surprise. Besides God Tiangang, it was the first time she had met an opponent on the god-destroying king ranking list who could go head-on against her. Sword King Wushuang. He was a sword cultivator, but he had the power of a body cultivator. He was really not simple. Normally, when a sword cultivator practiced the sword, they would only focus on the sword principle and strive to improve their sword principle continuously so that their sword would be sharper and stronger. However, Chen Zong was different. Besides everything that a sword cultivator should have, he also had a super strong physique. He might not be as strong as a real body cultivator, but he was not inferior in terms of strength. Such a strong physique brought great benefits to Chen Zong. It allowed Chen Zong to have stronger power and defense, as well as stronger survivability. This is for the best. The god-destroying king laughed, and her clear voice reverberated in all directions. The smile on her face became more obvious, and her wildness became more intense. When she did not attack, she was a quiet and cute girl. However, when she had a weapon in her hand, she changed. Especially when she was in a fight, she became crazy and could not be blocked. She was very scary. It was as if there was a destructive windstorm. The god-destroying king held two hammers and charged at Chen Zong again. The two hammers struck continuously and every hammer attack carried god-destroying power. The power was extremely terrifying and it was as if the void was going to explode. Chen Zong was suffocating. He could only feel that there were hammer shadows in front of his eyes. Every hammer shadow had terrifying power and it was as if they wanted to destroy everything. They wanted to smash him into pieces and turn him into powder. This was not a unique skill. However, its power was extremely terrifying and it was not inferior to a moon-class unique skill. The top 3 Sir Gods on the Sir Gods ranking list had shocking battle records of defeating or even killing 5th realm king-level experts. Among them, the god-destroying king's battle record was the most shocking. She had used 2 hammers to kill 2 5th realm king-level experts. It was extremely terrifying. In that battle, the god-destroying king had the upper hand when she fought against 2 5th realm king-level experts alone. She had suppressed the 2 5th realm king-level experts who had teamed up. However, they could not block her attacks and were killed in the end. Although the 2 5th realm king-level experts were very normal king-level experts, the gap between the 4th realm and the 5th realm was still very big. Facing such a violent attack, Chen Zong looked solemn. However, he did not retreat. Instead, he activated Silver Sword Body with all his might and increased the power of the sea-splitting sword energy to the extreme. He then performed Sword Principle. Heart Sword Principle and World Sword Principle were performed alternately. He used World Sword Principle to block the attack of the god-destroying king's hammers and used Heart Sword Principle to counterattack. The Silver Sword Body that was fully activated allowed Chen Zong to have more power. The fierce sea-splitting sword energy gave Chen Zong more powerful attack. The 2 superb sword principles were upgraded to the level of middle-grade moon-class unique skill by Chen Zong. The power of each stroke was extremely terrifying and each stroke was mysterious. Boundless Sword Principle was integrated into Heart Sword Principle, and Tide Dragon Sword Principle was integrated into World Sword Principle. As the power of these two sword principles increased, their level of mystery also increased. Powerful power, superb sword principle, and ingenious application of power allowed Chen Zong to face the attacks of the God-destroying king's hammers head-on, and he was not at a disadvantage. Chen Zong also realized that the attack of the God-destroying king's hammers was very simple. It was to smash down with shocking power and smash everything into pieces. There was no superb technique, and it seemed as though there was no need for superb technique. It was purely using power to suppress and force. The God-destroying power was extremely terrifying, and it could destroy everything. Once an ordinary item was touched, it would break into pieces straight away. Chen Zong could clearly feel that when his power came into contact with the God-destroying power, it would be destroyed by a lot. If not for the fact that Chen Zong's silver sword body was very strong and his sword principle was superb, he might not have been able to withstand it, and he would have been smashed into pieces by the God-destroying king's hammers. Crazy! The more the God-destroying king fought, the more excited he became. It was as though the blood of a mad demon had been ignited. There were layers of grayish-black ripples that spread out from his body. The ripples were filled with shocking God-destroying power, and they could destroy everything. They swept out and covered the hammers quickly. There were layers of grayish-black halos that spread out, and the halos were surging like waves. The silver-white color and the grayish-black color collided continuously. It seemed as though the silver-white color was at a disadvantage. However, it was very tenacious and it was not destroyed completely. It resisted firmly and did not retreat at all. Such a fierce battle caused everyone's scalp to go numb, and they swallowed hard. With such an attack, if they were grazed by it, they would be injured directly. If they were touched, they would die immediately. However, Chen Zong resisted it completely, and he could even counterattack. This caused everyone's scalp to go numb. On the Sir God ranking list, Chen Zong was the second person who could fight with the God-destroying king head-on. The first person was naturally Tian Gang God. However, Tian Gang God had the Tian Gang God body. This was an innate divine body that was very suitable for body cultivation. Hence, it was naturally very suitable for a head-on battle. They loved to fight head-on. Even so, he could not withstand the God-destroying king's God-destroying power in the end, and he exploded. "I can't withstand it," Tian Gang God muttered to himself. He had the deepest experience. At the beginning, he could withstand the God-destroying king's attack, and he could even counterattack. However, the God-destroying power was too frightening. It could destroy everything, and it would destroy his own power bit by bit. Moreover, the God-destroying king continued to fight, and his power seemed to be inexhaustible. Hence, he became more and more frightening. In the end, he could not hold on any longer and was blasted apart. Sword King Wushuang was not weak, and he was stronger than Tian Gang God. However, he would definitely not be able to withstand the God-destroying king's God-destroying power in the end. In the end, he would also be exploded by the God-destroying king's twin hammers. Although the God-destroying king looked cute, he was not cute at all. However, the next scene shocked Tian Gang God and God Deva I. Chen Zong struck with his sword, and it was extremely mysterious. It bypassed the violent twin hammers and slashed the God-destroying king's body directly. Chapter 2786. She was hit by the sword. God-destroying king was hit by the sword. However, she ignored the sword. When the sword slashed her destruction divine body, a terrifying power vibrated and blocked Chen Zong's sword. The power of the sword was weakened and destroyed. That was destruction divine power. It vibrated at a high frequency in a mysterious way and formed a defense. It protected God-destroying king's body from being broken and from being injured. Ignoring Chen Zong's sword attack, God-destroying king's twin hammers attacked continuously. It was extremely terrifying, and it forced Chen Zong to retreat. Endless destruction, continuous hit, God-destroying king shouted. God-destroying king shouted. In an instant, grayish-black halos swept out and dashed in all directions like raging waves. The twin hammers became even more violent in an instant. If God-destroying king's twin hammers attack previously was a normal wave attack, then the strength of the twin hammers attack had increased by a few times. It had changed from a normal wave to a tsunami. The twin hammers were extremely violent and they attacked continuously. They drowned Chen Zong. It has appeared, God-destroying king thought. He was inexplicably excited. Back then, he had challenged God-destroying king. With the strength of God-destroying king's body, he had fought God-destroying king head-on. In the end, he had been killed by God-destroying king's endless destruction continuous hit. The endless destruction combo seemed to be very simple to find out about and perform. However, it was actually very frightening. As long as the God-destroying king's power wasn't exhausted, the attack wouldn't stop and it would continue on. That wasn't all. The scariest thing was that as it continued to be performed, its power would continue to stack and the pressure that it brought to the opponent would continue to increase. In the end, it would be extremely frightening. Every attack would be able to destroy a mountain. Very soon, Chen Zong felt the terrifying pressure. God-destroying king's twin hammers were becoming more and more powerful and shocking. Chen Zong's expression turned grave. Endless destruction continuous hit was a special unique skill. If it wasn't interrupted, its power would increase continuously as though there was no limit to the increase. As long as the God-destroying king's divine power wasn't exhausted and as long as the God-destroying king could withstand it, theoretically, it could be increased without limit. Suffocation. Chen Zong felt like he was about to suffocate. Giant hammers were coming from all directions, and they were extremely terrifying. They attacked him like a violent storm, and every strike was like a falling meteorite. They were both fast and powerful, and were extremely ferocious. Such an attack was enough to sink the earth, break the sky, and shatter the stars. We can't hold on any longer. Chen Zong couldn't help but feel apprehensive. Although his swordsmanship was superb and he had surpassed God-destroying kings, God-destroying king's power was too frightening and it continued to increase. At that moment, the power of every hammer stroke was a few times stronger than before. It felt as though God-destroying king was continuously performing powerful secret skills. Moreover, it continued to increase in power. Even the Celestial Dipper Divine Lord's Celestial Dipper Divine Body couldn't compare to such strength. The 6th level of the sword sharpening technique. This was what Chen Zong had obtained after 10 years of seclusion in the Void God realm. He had cultivated the sword sharpening art to the 6th level. The sword sharpening art was split into 9 levels. However, the higher the level, the harder it was to master. For example, previously, when Chen Zong had mastered the 4th level, it was very difficult for him to master the 5th level. He had only truly mastered the 5th level after mastering the 2nd level of the Holy Demon Sword Codex. As for the 6th level, although he had mastered it, it was a bit difficult for him to perform it. It was because of this that Chen Zong hadn't performed it. However, at that moment, he had no choice but to perform it. Under the 6th level of the sword sharpening art, Chen Zong's attack power was increased by 6 times. Roar! Chen Zong swung his sword. However, it was as though it had turned into a shocking divine dragon with monstrous power. It charged out and let out a ferocious roar. It was filled with shocking power. Dragon of the World! This stroke was a unique skill that was improved and upgraded from the foundation of world descent. It was a stroke that merged the world sword principle with the Tide Dragon sword principle. It was a stroke that merged the way of sword, way of world, and way of space. Similar to the Heartslayer, it was a middle-grade Sun-class unique skill. However, it possessed a different kind of power. The Dragon of the World had unparalleled divine power. Under the amplification of power by 6 times, the power that was unleashed was extremely terrifying. The God-destroying king's attack was blocked straight away, and the boundless continuous hit was interrupted. He was pushed back and flew out. You can actually break my boundless destructive continuous hit. The God-destroying king's face was filled with surprise. It was the first time that her boundless destructive continuous hit was interrupted by someone who was at the same cultivation level as her. Even God Tiangang couldn't do it previously. Excitement, excitement. This was what the God-destroying king was feeling at that moment. The power of the unparalleled Sword King was actually so strong. Great destruction of heaven and earth. As the God-destroying king's voice faded away, an extremely terrifying aura burst out instantly. 100-meter-tall grayish-black shadow then appeared and stood in the void. Its destruction divine power was extremely terrifying. Chen Zong's expression grew grave. Such an aura obviously surpassed the level of a unique skill. It was the aura of a divine skill. The God-destroying king had actually mastered a divine skill. She was the first expert that Chen Zong had met who had mastered a divine skill in the 4th realm. She lived up to her name as the number 1 on the Sir God list. Destruction divine skill. It was a divine skill that belonged to the destruction doctrine. Its destructive power was unparalleled and extremely terrifying. Hong, the God-destroying king, let out all his divine power, and the 2 hammers seemed to have merged into one. The grayish-black shadow that was 100 meters tall also threw out the giant hammer in its hand. The giant hammer smashed the void and headed toward the God-destroying king. Destruction. Destroy everything. Shatter everything. Chen Zong felt that he was facing a catastrophe. Under such a blow, everything would be destroyed and turned into powder. Everything would vanish into nothingness. Chen Zong, who had mastered a divine skill, knew how terrifying a divine skill was. Under such a blow, everything would vanish into nothingness. The consciousness of the thousands of experts on the Sir God list was also extremely shocked. What kind of attack was that? Why was it so terrifying? Divine skill. God Tianmu, God Tiangang, and the other people who were ranked at the top of the Sir God list were more knowledgeable. They immediately recognized the God-destroying king's move. Divine skill. Only a divine skill could have such divine power. Divine skill. I wonder when I will be able to master a divine skill, God Tiangang thought to himself. Divine skill was mastered by experts in the 6th realm. Of course, there were also people who could master a divine skill in the 4th realm. However, under normal circumstances, those who could master a divine skill in the 4th realm were mostly born with a divine body. The so-called born with a divine body would naturally master a divine skill when one's potential was continuously developed to a certain extent. Of course, even for a born with a divine body to master a divine skill in the 4th realm, it was an extremely difficult thing. God Ziyang, God Samsara, God Tiangang and God Tianmu had yet to master a divine skill because they had not developed their divine bodies to that extent. God-destroying king had mastered a divine skill because he had developed his destruction divine body to a certain extent. Of course, Celestial Dipper Divine Lord and Celestial Eye Divine Lord had also developed their divine bodies to the extreme. They were only a hair's breadth away from mastering a divine skill. However, it was not easy to break through. However, any innate divine body could master a divine skill as long as they reached the 5th realm. Moreover, the divine skill mastered by a born with a divine body was different from the divine skill mastered by an ordinary cultivator. For example, God-destroying king had a destruction divine body. Hence, the destruction divine skill that she mastered was extremely compatible with her body. She could unleash a terrifying power that cultivators without a destruction divine body could not compare with. When the great destruction of heaven and earth struck, it could destroy everything. There was nothing that could withstand it. Chen Zong looked solemn. He pointed with his left finger and a silver light was released. A finger-pointing skill. It was a space divine skill. Chernzong was comprehending in the virtual god secret land as an emperor-level expert. Hence, both of his divine skills had improved tremendously and both of them had reached small achievement. The divine skill was divided into entry, small completion, great completion and complete completion. Before entering the void god's secret realm, Chernzong's two divine skills had not reached the entry level. He had only scratched the surface of the divine skill, but he was already able to unleash shocking power. After reaching small completion, his power was even more terrifying. However, Chernzong had never used his divine skill before. God-destroying King was the first person who was lucky enough to face Chernzong's small achievement divine skill. Fixed. Suddenly, the void was fixed. God-destroying Shadow was also fixed at that moment. It was as though he was frozen and he could not move at all. God-destroying King was also frozen. He maintained the posture of striking with his hammers, and he looked as though he had turned into a statue. However, in the next moment, God-destroying King's aura continued to expand, and it became even more fierce and terrifying. It was as though it was going to explode completely and break free from all restraint. Chernzong's eyes turned grave and he immediately drew out his sword. The sixth stage of sword sharpening skill. Heart slaying. The stroke was extremely fast. The sword light that was extremely condensed pierced through the void in an instant. The moment the sword was drawn, it had already hit God-destroying King. With an increase of 6 times, in addition to its terrifying piercing power, the sword broke God-destroying King's destruction divine power defense and pierced through her divine body. The sword aura raged and swallowed God-destroying King's vitality. Death. God-destroying King had been killed by Chernzong. Everyone was stunned, especially Divine Lord Astral Vault and Divine Lord Deva I. Divine skill. Chernzong had also mastered a divine skill and it was a space divine skill. It was too shocking. Could it be that he had a space divine body? However, they felt that Chernzong did not have an inborn divine body. He did not have an inborn divine body, but he had mastered a divine skill. Moreover, he seemed to be very strong. It was simply indescribable. They were shocked, and so was God-destroying King who had been killed. She had actually been defeated. She had been defeated by her opponent when she had used a destruction divine skill. It was simply unbelievable. She had never thought that someone of the same level would be able to defeat her. Divine skill. God reincarnation was silent. Chernzong's abilities had refreshed his knowledge time and time again. He had even mastered a divine skill. With a divine skill in hand, it was a great trump card. Divine skill. After a moment of silence, God reincarnation's eyes were twinkling. The aura around his body spread, and it seemed to have become even stronger. I must master a divine skill, reincarnation divine skill. This was a form of motivation. Being motivated, God reincarnation's potential in his reincarnation divine body improved. The outside world was in an uproar. The title that had occupied the Divine Lord ranking list for 100 years had been replaced. The person who replaced her was Sword King Wushuang. Number 1 on Divine Lord ranking list. One sword in the only. Chapter 2787. With one sword, he reigned supreme on Sir God list. Sword Emperor Wushuang was famous. Although the universe was vast, big news would spread at a shocking speed in the shortest time possible. Most people knew about it. Of course, those who didn't know about it were those who weren't qualified enough. Shocking. The number 1 on Sir God list had always been God-destroying King for 100 years. No one expected it to change in an instant. It was Sword Emperor Wushuang. God-destroying King was still on Sir God list. What did this mean? It meant that Sword Emperor Wushuang had defeated God-destroying King and replaced him. To be able to defeat a strong person like the God-destroying King, Who exactly was Sword King Wushuang? Very soon, someone found out about Sword Emperor Wushuang. He was a disciple of Nine Heavens Imperial Court, an emperor-level force. He was once number 1 on Divine General list. Now, he was number 1 on Sir God list. It was simply shocking. When the people from Nine Heavens Imperial Court found out about it, their shock was indescribable. There were experts on Divine General list in Nine Heavens Imperial Court. As for Sir God list, there was only one spot. Moreover, his ranking was very low. Chern Zong, a disciple from Nine Heavens Imperial Court, was number 1 on Sir God list. The impact was too great. Those who used to look down on Chern Zong were already numb to it. On the other hand, the people from Doctrine Alliance were extremely excited. War Demon and Chen Xiu were even more excited. They were experts in the fourth realm. However, they weren't on Sir God list yet. Sword Emperor Wushuang Chen Zong, number 1 on Sir God list? I really want to see how strong you are and how many punches you can take from me. In a stronghold of infernal order, an extremely muscular figure chuckled. Sir God list is just an undeserved reputation. Not far away, there was a faintly discernible and illusory figure drifting like a ghost. His voice was also erratic and filled with an unreal feeling. His words were filled with disdain towards Sir God list. That's true. The so-called Divine Lord ranking is indeed nothing much. If it weren't for special reasons, the top 10 of the Divine Lord ranking would have been occupied by my holy church. That Saber Monarch, who was ranked 9th on the Divine Lord ranking, was killed by me with a few punches. The majestic man laughed and said, "But then again, those demons from the Purgatory sect aren't weak either. Those demons from the Purgatory sect are probably very interested in this unparalleled Sword King." The ghost-like figure said unhurriedly, "That's good. Let's let them test this person's quality." The muscular man laughed. Good, good, good. Ha 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 ha. The Tianguang Peak Lord was overjoyed. Number 1 on the Divine Lord list. First place on the Divine Lord list. Not 10th place, not 3rd place, but 1st place. 3rd place and 1st place were two completely different concepts. The Tianguang Peak Lord's expectation for Chern Zong was to be in the top 10 of the Divine Lord list. However, in reality, he didn't know if Chern Zong could enter the top 10 of the Divine Lord list. After all, it wasn't an easy task. It was extremely difficult. In the powerful Taihao Mountain, there was only one person who could enter the top 10 of the Divine Lord list, and he was only ranked 7th. However, no one had expected that Chern Zong would not only be in the top 10 of the Sir God ranking list, but he had also defeated the God-destroying king, who had been ranked number 1 on the Sir God ranking list for 100 years and had never been shaken. The former first place of the Divine General list and the current first place of the Divine Lord list were truly shocking and terrifying. First, Tianguang Peak took back the position of the main peak and became one of the 8 main peaks. Then, Chern Zong entered the first place of the Divine Lord list, making Tianguang Peak's reputation flourish. The first place of the Divine Lord list, I have to fight hard for Chern Zong, the Tianguang Peak Lord muttered to himself in excitement. His face was full of smiles and his eyes shone brightly. Being in the top 100 of the Divine Lord list would earn rewards from Taihao Mountain. If one was in the top 30, the rewards would be even greater. If one was in the top 10, the rewards would be on another level. For the top 3, the rewards would be raised to another level. For the first place, the rewards would be raised to an extremely high level. However, since ancient times, when Taihao Mountain was at its peak, no disciple could enter the first place. The highest was the 3rd place. As for now, it was the 7th place. No, it should be the 5th place. Wang Qiu had gained a lot in the virtual god secret realm. After cultivating in seclusion, his abilities had improved greatly. As such, he defeated the 6th and 5th place of the Divine Lord list and replaced them. However, he lost when he challenged the 4th place. The top 10 of the Divine Lord list, Every one of them had terrifying abilities. After being ranked first on the Divine Lord decree, Chern Zong immediately felt that the universe's favor he received became even stronger. This feeling was wonderful. At every moment, there seemed to be sparks of inspiration colliding with each other. This was the benefit of being ranked first on the Divine Lord decree and being favored by the universe. With this, if I break through to the fifth realm, the benefits I can get will be even greater, Chern Zong muttered to himself as his eyes shone brightly. When he was in the third realm, Chern Zong was in the first place of the Divine General list. When he broke through, he was greatly favored by the will of the universe. The benefits were amazing. Once he broke through, he immediately became an expert in the fourth realm. He was no longer at the entry level, which was equivalent to saving decades or even centuries of cultivation time. If it was not for the support of the will of the universe that was in the first place of the Divine General list, which saved him many years of cultivation time, he probably would not have been able to enter the Divine Lord list. As for being in the first place of the Divine Lord list, he did not even need to think about it. Moreover, he would not have been able to compete for a place in the Virtual God Secret Realm. Without the opportunity in the Virtual God Secret Realm, Chern Zong would not have been able to improve so quickly. He would not have been able to break through to the top 100 of the Divine Lord list and even the first place now. It could be said that these were all interconnected. He could not have done without any one of them. It would not have been enough to achieve everything he had now. Many times, if an opportunity was missed, it would be missed. If he wanted to wait for this opportunity, he might not be able to wait for a lifetime. Even if he did, it might be a long time later. With my current strength, I should be able to break through to the fifth realm. Chern Zong thought to himself, but then he muttered, "But I haven't reached my true limit yet. I feel that I can still improve further. It would be better to break through after I reach my true limit." Although he could break through to the fifth realm now, Chern Zong was not very willing to do so. He always felt that he was still lacking something. There was still a little bit of potential that he could continue to explore. Perhaps after exploring to the limit, his abilities would not improve much. However, it would be more beneficial for breaking through to the fifth realm. Whether it was a breakthrough after reaching the true limit or not, the difference was very obvious. The further he went, the more obvious it would be. Therefore, if there were no accidents, Chern Zong must explore to the true limit of each realm before breaking through. This would be more beneficial for his future path of cultivation. If he broke through because he did not explore to the true limit of any of the realms and left a flaw, it would cause regrets in the future. The Tianguang Peak Lord went directly to the Senate Hall to fight for more rewards for Chern Zong. After all, Chern Zong was the first disciple in the history of Taihao Mountain to be ranked first on the Divine Lord list. This had an extraordinary significance. To a certain extent, it would also strengthen the reputation of Taihao Mountain. Moreover, Chern Zong was favored by the will of the universe. This would also passively help Taihao Mountain to be favored by the will of the universe. The more disciples who were ranked on the three lists, the more favor they would receive from the will of the universe. Perhaps one was not much, but when stacked together, it was very impressive. This was especially so when the higher the ranking, the greater the reward. The value of being ranked first on the Divine Lord list was astonishing. A discussion also broke out in the Senate Hall because of this. Many of the elders were present. The 10th elder was from the Lanhai clan of Gulan Peak. He was a member of the Lanhai clan. No, the rewards can be given, but the Dreamless Palace only opens once every 1,000 years. There are only 3 places each time. How precious is that? The 10th elder slammed the table and shouted angrily, "Our Taihao Mountain has countless experts and geniuses. It would be more appropriate to give this place to an emperor-level expert." The Dreamless Palace. This was one of the 19 secret realms of Taihao Mountain. It was also the first secret realm. It was the most mysterious and the most brilliant. It only opened once every 1,000 years. At most, only 3 people could enter each time it opened. 3 spots were undoubtedly a small number for a place as big as Taihao Mountain. Everyone wanted to get a spot like this. Even those with mediocre talent would be able to gain a lot of benefits if they entered. The places were so precious, but the Tianguang Peak Lord wanted to get one for Chunzong. The 10th elder was the first to disagree. Why did he disagree? In addition to the precious place of the Dreamless Palace, the biggest reason was that Chunzong was not a disciple of the Lanhai clan of Gulan Peak. If he was, the 10th elder would have raised both hands in agreement. How could he disagree so strongly? At the moment, Gulan Peak had been defeated by Tianguang Peak and had been demoted from the position of 8th principal peak to one of the 24 peaks, which was a great blow to them. Qi He, the most outstanding disciple of the young generation of the Lanhai clan, had also suffered a great blow and was at a low point. This was a great blow to the Lanhai clan. They had not only lost their reputation but also many resources. In the next 1,000 years, the Lanhai clan could not issue any challenges. The resources of the main peak became the resources of the branch peaks, which decreased a lot. As a result, the cultivation resources of the Lanhai clan had to be reduced, and the cultivation efforts were reduced. This slowed down the growth of the Lanhai clan. Moreover, the longer the time, the greater the impact. It could be said that this time, Gulan Peak was demoted because of Chunzong. Chunzong was the main culprit. Under such circumstances, the Lanhai clan hated Chunzong very much. The 10th elder was the strongest swordsman of the Lanhai clan, and also the person with the highest status. He had to avenge the Lanhai clan. In Taihao Mountain, they couldn't do anything to Chunzong, so they had to do everything possible to block Chunzong's opportunity and make it difficult for Chunzong to improve. The Dreamless Palace was a great opportunity. If it was obtained by Chunzong with his talent, there would definitely be an astonishing improvement. This was something that the Lanhai clan did not want to see. The 10th elder objected vehemently, but the other elders were lost in thought. The first place of the Divine Master list was an unprecedented achievement of Taihao Mountain. It was worth considering. Give Chunzong a place of the Dreamless Palace. The 9th elder said, with Chunzong's talent, if he enters the Dreamless Palace when he reaches the 5th realm, he may have a chance to compete for the first place of the Divine King list. The first place of the Divine King list. What an amazing honor this was! It's natural to give Chunzong a place of the Dreamless Palace. The 4th elder also agreed. In the end, Chunzong got the place of the Dreamless Palace through voting. However, there was a condition: within 10 years. If Chunzong reached the 5th realm within 10 years, he could enter the Dreamless Palace. If it was more than 10 years, the Dreamless Palace would be opened, and he would have no chance. Chapter 2788. Taihao Mountain's 10,000 Treasures Realm was the place where Taihao Mountain stored all kinds of treasures. The Taihao Mountain's 36 peaks and 8 great academies all had their own inheritances. Naturally, they also had their own treasures. However, none of them could compare to the Taihao Mountain's 10,000 Treasures Realm. That was because the 10,000 Treasures Realm had been accumulated by the Taihao Mountain for millions of years. At this moment, Chunzong came to the 10,000 Treasures Realm under the lead of the 9th elder. In addition to the quota of the Dreamless Palace, you can choose any 3 treasures in the 10,000 Treasures Realm. The 9th elder said. This was the result of Tianguang Peak's strong argument and the secret support of several elders. Chunzong's talent, in the eyes of the elders, was very outstanding. He broke the history of Taihao Mountain. Although no one could surpass him in the future, he was at least unprecedented. With such talent, if he was properly nurtured, his future achievements would definitely not be low. Therefore, in the Senior Elder Hall, the 10th senior elder insisted on stopping Chen Zong from obtaining any fortuitous opportunities. He only gave him some simple and ordinary fortuitous opportunities to get rid of him. However, the 9th senior elder disagreed. He argued for what was right, and with the support of the other senior elders, Chen Zong was finally rewarded heavily. Chen Zong got the quota of the Dreamless Palace, but under the unwillingness of the 10th elder, there were conditions to get the quota of the Dreamless Palace. First of all, Chen Zong had to be in the 5th realm. Otherwise, he wouldn't get much if he entered the Dreamless Palace in the 4th realm. After all, Chen Zong had almost developed the potential of his own realm. All in all, the benefits of entering the Dreamless Palace in the 5th realm would be much more than those in the 4th realm. Secondly, it was less than 10 years before the opening of the Dreamless Palace. Therefore, Chen Zong had to break through to the 5th realm in 10 years, or he would lose the quota. This was a gamble. The 10th elder was gambling that Chen Zong couldn't break through to the 5th realm in 10 years. Although it was the limit of the 4th realm, it was not so easy to break through to the 5th realm. It required luck. Moreover, if Chen Zong broke through in advance in order to pursue the quota of the Dreamless Palace, it might leave a little flaw in his foundation, which would affect his future cultivation. In short, the 10th elder was trying his best to stop Chen Zong's cultivation, even if it was just a little. Other than the quota for the Dreamless Palace, the Tianguang Peak Lord tried his best to fight for Chen Zong to enter the Wanbao realm to choose treasures. In the end, he was limited to 3 items. Of course, compared to the quota of the Dreamless Palace, although the value of the 3 treasures in the Myriad Treasures realm was shocking, it was still inferior. However, no matter what, being able to enter the Myriad Treasures realm to select treasures was an extremely shocking matter. Stepping into the Myriad Treasures realm, Chen Zong immediately felt endless auras. These auras were extremely mysterious and each had their own Taoist rhymes. The treasures that could be taken into the Myriad Treasures realm were all extraordinary and could not be compared to ordinary treasures. Each treasure contained a different aura. Chen Zong carefully felt it. Some treasures exuded a blazing heat, an incomparable blazing heat like a small sun. Some treasures exuded a cold aura. Chen Zong glanced around. Many treasures were not placed on the shelves like merchandise, but were scattered all over in a very strange way. The Myriad Treasures realm was like a small world. For example, in the sky, there were dots of light flickering like stars. These were treasures of the star attribute and contained the mystery of the star Tao. The treasure that was suspended in the sky like a big fireball contained the mystery of the sun Tao. There was also a treasure that was suspended at the edge of the sky that exuded a cold aura. It was a treasure that contained the mystery of the sun Tao. A big tree that supported the sky exuded a very mysterious aura and was full of vitality. It was a treasure that contained the wood Tao. All treasures contained a unique aura of the Great Path. Of course, such treasures were at least of the 6th level. Chen Zong felt the aura fluctuations in all directions. It was very mysterious. These treasures were of the 6th level, the 7th level, and even the 8th level. They all had different colors and auras, making Chen Zong feel like there was a dazzling array of treasures. It was too much for his eyes to take in, and he was dazzled. However, Chen Zong's eyes were not confused, and his mind was not confused. The silver sword body of the divine demon sword body has been cultivated. It is equivalent to the level of an acquired saint body. However, because of the enhancement of the mysterious seed, it is not inferior to an ordinary innate saint body, Chen Zong thought to himself. There were 4 types of innate physiques: spiritual body, imperial body, saint body, and divine body. The sword body section in the divine demon sword technique was a superb technique to cultivate a unique physique. However, an innate physique was an innate physique, while the divine demon sword body was cultivated. It was more or less different from an innate physique. The 4 levels of the divine demon sword body corresponded to the acquired spiritual body, acquired imperial body, acquired saint body, and acquired divine body. Although they were very similar to an innate physique, there were still differences. However, the divine demon sword body served the divine demon sword essence. Therefore, after cultivating the divine demon sword body and mastering the divine demon sword essence, when fully activated, it was comparable to an innate physique. However, before Chen Zong obtained the divine demon sword technique, he first obtained the mysterious seed. He was nourished by the life force in it and enhanced his bloodline. Although he did not obtain any innate physique, with the enhancement of his bloodline, he had some power that was comparable to an innate spiritual body. In other words, it was equivalent to obtaining an acquired innate spiritual body. With that as the foundation, after cultivating the divine demon sword technique, he stacked it up and further enhanced the divine demon sword body. However, the prerequisite for cultivating the divine demon sword body was that he did not have any innate physique, and Chen Zong happened to meet that requirement. Now, the divine demon sword body was Chen Zong's greatest foundation. After cultivating the 2nd level, his strength increased greatly. If he cultivated the 3rd level, his strength would increase even further. However, cultivating the 3rd level of the divine demon sword body was many times more difficult than cultivating the 2nd level. The key was the materials. Cultivating the 2nd level of the divine demon sword body requires level 6 sword principle origin, and cultivating the 3rd level of the divine demon sword body requires level 7 sword principle origin. Chen Zong muttered to himself. His eyes gradually scanned and his body flew like the wind. In addition to level 7 sword principle origin, I also need heavenly gold divine marrow, innate saint essence, and so on. The 2nd level of the divine demon sword body required many materials. The 3 most precious and rare materials were heavenly gold silver marrow, level 6 sword principle origin, and Wukong saint essence. However, the 3rd level of the divine demon sword body not only required more and more precious materials, but the 3 most important materials were also much more precious. Heavenly gold divine marrow was also a kind of body refinement material. It was necessary for level 7 body refinement experts and was very precious. Once it appeared, level 7 body refinement experts would fight for it. The level 7 sword principle origin was also called the Emperor level sword principle origin. Only level 7 Emperor level sword cultivators could condense it. As for the innate saint essence, it was even more precious. It was a natural holy object. In other words, it was an amazing treasure that could reach the saint level when developed. Even saint level experts would be tempted by it. Not long after, Chen Zong found a sword mountain. It was a sword-shaped mountain that was a few hundred meters tall. It stood on the ground and pointed straight to the sky. The aura that it exuded had an indescribable sharpness. Chen Zong immediately became excited. Sword principle origin. This mountain that was a few hundred meters tall and straight like a sword emitted a shocking sharpness and divine power. It was formed by the sword principle origin. Moreover, it was formed by the Emperor-level sword principle origin. You'll be the one. Chen Zong made his choice without hesitation. However, with Chen Zong's strength, he was unable to absorb the Emperor-level sword principle origin. Fortunately, before entering, the 9th Grand Elder gave Chen Zong a treasure that could help him collect treasures. He could only collect 3 items. Without hesitation, Chen Zong took out the clay jar and activated it with his own strength. He aimed the mouth of the clay jar at the sword mountain. A golden light shone out and landed on the sword mountain that was hundreds of meters tall. In an instant, the sword mountain was enveloped by the golden light. It quickly shrank and flew into the clay jar. The first treasure was in his hands. Chen Zong continued to search. It would be best if he could find the 3 main treasures needed to cultivate the 3rd level of the divine demon sword body. As for the other treasures and materials, they would be easier to obtain. Thinking about it, if he cultivated the third level of the divine demon sword body, the heavenly gold sword body, and then cultivated the third level of the divine demon sword origin, the power would be terrifying to the extreme. It would probably be easy for him to kill fifth-level cultivators. However, Chen Zong was also very clear that unless he could obtain the three important materials here, it would be almost impossible for him to cultivate the third level of the divine demon sword technique at the fourth level. Chen Zong continued to search. Looking at the many treasures, he was very tempted. However, he could only suppress it. He could only choose 3 treasures. Although Chen Zong was very tempted and wanted to obtain any treasure, he had to make a choice. There were thousands of treasures that he was tempted by, but he could only choose 3. This was a test of his temperament. If his temperament was not strong enough, he would be lost. Chen Zong's temperament was very strong. His divine will was extremely tough and would not be shaken. However, the feeling of being unable to obtain something while looking at it was still very challenging. It made his heart itch unbearably. Finally, Chen Zong found the second treasure. It was a golden light that swam in the sky like a real dragon. It was like a golden dragon. However, it was not the dazzling kind of gold. Instead, it was a kind of soft and ethereal gold. Heavenly gold divine marrow. This was a treasure suitable for 7th-level Emperor-level body refinement experts. It was also one of the 3 most important treasures needed to cultivate the 3rd level of the divine demon sword body. Without any hesitation, Chen Zong immediately took out the clay jar and activated its power again. A golden light shone out and landed on the golden dragon. The golden dragon swam very fast. If it were Chen Zong alone, he would not be able to catch up with it, let alone capture it. Fortunately, he had the clay jar in hand. With its help, the golden dragon was quickly captured and shrunk rapidly. Finally, it entered the clay jar. After obtaining the second treasure, Chen Zong continued to search for the third and most precious treasure, the Connate Saint Essence. The Connate Saint Essence was a treasure that was slightly inferior to the Connate Clear Chi. It was not so easy to obtain. After searching around, Chen Zong confirmed that there was no Connate Saint Essence in the myriad treasures realm of the Taihao Mountain. He could only settle for the next best thing and exchange for other treasures. Chapter 2789. In the universe, in a region of Taihao Mountain, there was a large expanse of darkness spreading. It enveloped the entire region. The area it covered was very wide. It directly enveloped a valley that was tens of thousands of miles in radius. Around the edges of the valley, there were pitch-black pillars covered in strange patterns. They were like totem poles, emitting an extremely gloomy, cold, and mysterious aura. Every pillar of darkness was 100 meters tall, pointing straight at the sky. There were a total of 108 pillars like that. Every single pillar shone with black light, forming darkness that enveloped the surroundings. Within the valley, 100 black-robed people stood in a circle at the center of the valley. Every single black-robed person radiated with a powerful presence, just like the presence of a 7th realm Emperor-level expert. 108 Emperor-level emperors. What a startling formation! Why had they gathered here? The 108 black-robed experts formed hand seals, and their powerful energies began to vibrate at the same frequency. The 108 totem-like black pillars at the edge of the valley began to vibrate as well. They all released powerful energies, resonating with the pillars. In the end, the 108 streams of demonic light seemed to break through space and time. They gathered above the valley before turning into a ball of darkness. It pulsed violently, as if it was nurturing some terrifying existence. It struck down. The huge ball of black light fell from the sky, striking the center of the valley. However, it did not shatter the valley. Instead, it constantly merged, intertwined, and pulsed. A terrifying presence filled with deathly stillness radiated from the violently pulsing ball of black light. Immediately, the black light receded and condensed at the edges, turning into a dark vortex that was 100 meters wide. The presence of deathly stillness it gave off grew heavier and heavier. Wave after wave of pure deathly chi poured out like a flood. It was extremely violent. The 108 black-robed people all circulated their energy to isolate the presence of the deathly chi. Not only was the deathly chi dense and pure, but it also contained powerful laws of death. Immediately after, a huge head poked out from the vortex. It was a skeleton's head. It was made of countless bones in the most perfect way, like flesh and blood. The presence it exuded was extremely terrifying. The skeleton's head, which seemed to be made of flesh and blood, wore a pure white skeleton crown. It was as if a king had descended. Its eyes burned with shocking and eerie black flames that seemed to be able to devour everything. It made one's heart palpitate. Who is it that has awakened this king? The huge skeleton's head opened its mouth and let out an astonishing voice. The voice contained a terrifying power that seemed to be able to shatter everything. The huge skeleton's head spoke in the language of the dead. Honorable Lord Hellbone, we are the Avicii Holy Church. We have awakened you this time to discuss a great plan. A black-robed person immediately spoke, speaking in the language of the dead. The netherworld belonged to the interspatial layer of the universe. It had its own unique language and civilization. However, to the powerhouses of the outer universe, the interspatial layer was not so mysterious. In fact, once one's cultivation reached the 6th realm and became an emperor-level powerhouse, one would be qualified to enter the netherworld alone. Of course, many emperor-level powerhouses would choose to form teams of 3 to 5 people. It was safer this way. As for the 7th realm emperor-level powerhouses, most of them acted alone and entered the netherworld. There was no life in the netherworld, and it was deathly still. Countless specters inhabited it, and it was very dangerous. But at the same time, there were many treasures. Many treasures could not be found in the outer universe, and they could only be found in the netherworld. Many powerhouses had entered the netherworld from time to time over countless years. Over time, they naturally gained a deeper understanding of the netherworld. The language of the dead had become a new language that many powerhouses needed to understand. It was best if they could learn it. Fortunately, under the restrictions of the laws of the universe, it was easier to enter the interspatial layer from the outer universe. However, it was many times more difficult to enter the outer universe from the interspatial layer. Otherwise, many netherworld powerhouses from the interspatial layer would have stepped into the outer universe long ago. With the aggressive nature of the dead spirits, the outer universe would have been in chaos long ago. In addition, there was also the inner universe. That was a place even more terrifying than the outer universe. Finally, the core of the universe was even more incredible. It was an extremely mysterious place. Even 7th realm emperor-level powerhouses would find it difficult to step into it. The reason was unknown. Now, the people of the Infernal Order had opened a passage from the outer universe to the interspatial layer. They had even awakened an undead monarch. What kind of concept was an undead monarch? Only saint-level dead spirits were qualified to be called monarch. Opening a passage and awakening a sleeping monarch was not a small matter. It was a big matter. When a monarch was enraged, even if it was a saint-level expert, it would not be an exaggeration to say that millions of corpses would be piled up. Rage. Rage exploded. Deathly silence and murderous intent surged like a tide. It directly impacted the 108 emperor-level powerhouses of the Infernal Order. The difference between an emperor-level powerhouse and a saint-level powerhouse was too great. It was so great that they could not bear it. "Monarch, don't be angry." A loud laugh suddenly rang out. Immediately after, a black light shot down from the sky. A black-robed figure walked out from the burning black demonic flames. His aura was unusually powerful, and he actually managed to resist the terrifying attack of Sovereign Ming Gu's aura. A saint-level powerhouse. The person who had come was a saint-level powerhouse. Only saint-level powerhouses could treat saint-level powerhouses as equals. Only saint-level powerhouses had the right to talk to them face to face. Not long after, the saint-level powerhouse of the Infernal Order and Monarch Hellbone finished talking. Both sides came to an agreement. My true body is still unable to descend into the outer universe. In that case, let my army go first, said Monarch Hellbone. He retracted his huge head. In the next breath, a figure stepped out from the 100-meter vortex. It was a member of the Skeleton Clan. Then, a second, a third, and a fourth followed. There was even a Skeleton Clan knight riding a skeletal beast. In addition, there were also strange Skeleton Clan members with a pair of bone wings that looked like skeletal bat. Soon, the huge valley was filled with Skeleton Clan warriors. They stood side by side in an orderly manner, motionless like countless statues. They were silent, but in their pitch-black eye sockets, there were balls of illusory flames burning. The aura they exuded was incomparably gloomy and eerie, causing one's heart to palpitate. Although it's a pile of bones, it's still very scary to have so many of them in a formation. In the valley, an Emperor-level powerhouse of the Infernal Order said in a low voice. The valley was very large. There were already more than 10,000 Skeleton Clan warriors gathered here. A low roar sounded. Immediately, the Skeleton Clan warriors moved. The weakest level of the dead spirits in the Netherworld was the Fourth Realm. This troop of over 10,000 Skeleton Clan warriors was an elite force. They were at least at the peak of the Fourth Realm. There were also many Fifth Realm and Sixth Realm powerful beings. Just as this batch of Skeleton Clan warriors stepped out of the valley, a second batch of Skeleton Clan warriors followed them into the valley through the passageway. One batch after another. 100,000, 200,000 in the entire interlayer universe. There was only one great world, and that was the Netherworld. It was incomparably vast. There were countless undead born in it, so much so that it was impossible to count. The weakest undead were at the Fourth Realm. There were even more Fifth Realm undead everywhere. There were also many Sixth and Seventh Realm undead. As for the Eighth Realm Monarch-level undead, there were more of them than in the outer universe. Once a war in the Netherworld began, it was no small matter. There were easily hundreds of thousands or even millions of undead. The casualties each time were in the tens of thousands. Now, only 200,000 Skeleton Clan warriors were deployed. They could only be regarded as Monarch Hellbone's vanguard. It was like a test. Move out. The 200,000 Skeleton Clan warriors moved out of the valley for real. They really stepped out of the valley and pushed their way out. Everywhere they passed, the aura of death spread, the silence swept, and death descended. Life was constantly devoured and extinguished, turning the place into a land of death. In the sky above, there were people from the Infernal Order following them. They were very excited as they watched the skeleton army push their way out. The universe was so vast. It wasn't easy to shake the entire universe and cause it to fall into chaos with just the help of the people of the Seamless Saint religion and the Purgatory Demon Gate. Those powerful holy lands weren't just decorations. Therefore, after some discussion, they finally decided to ask for external help. In other words, they wanted to attract other strong enemies and let them cause chaos in the universe. The Infernal Order could then profit from it and fish in troubled waters. Then, what kind of external enemy should they look for? In the universe, there were still forces like the Infernal Order and Purgatory Demon Gate. However, they were not as strong as the Infernal Order. The difference was too great. Even if they combined forces, it would not be enough. In the end, they thought of the interlayer universe. Extradite the undead from the interlayer universe to the outer universe. As long as there were enough undead, it would be enough to cause great chaos and allow the Infernal Order to profit from it. As for the Purgatory Demon Gate, they would act on their own. Chaos, complete chaos. The more chaotic it was, the more benefits the infernal order could obtain. Only then could they become stronger and eventually dominate the outer universe, above all other forces. Seeing the 200,000 skeleton clan warriors push their way out, killing and injuring countless people, the people of the infernal order did not stop them. On the contrary, they felt incomparably carefree. Those who were killed by the skeleton clan would not be able to rest in peace after death. They would either turn into walking corpses or become remnant souls to wreak havoc everywhere. Soon, under the invasion of the skeleton clan, one of the continents was conquered. The aura of death surged and filled the air. It covered everything in all directions, invading and devouring everything. In the beginning, the people of the infernal order tried to cover it up. However, as the entire continent fell, the aura of death overflowed and it was difficult to cover it up. Finally, it was exposed. After investigation, it turned out to be an invasion of the undead. This news was spread out in the shortest time possible. It was known by the Holy Land Taihao Mountain. Naturally, the other forces of the Taihao Mountain also received the news one after another. The invasion of the undead from the interlayer universe and the invasion of a continent was no small matter. Chapter 2790. Why would the undead army from the interlayer universe appear in the outer universe? Elder 8's expression was solemn. It was relatively easy for powerhouses from the outer universe to enter the interlayer universe, but it was more than 1,000 times more difficult for the undead from the interlayer universe to enter the outer universe. This made it almost impossible for the undead from the interlayer universe to enter the outer universe. Even if they could enter, it would only be a very small accidental entry. Small-scale undead would not be able to cause much damage and casualties, and would usually be wiped out. Small-scale undead like that would not attract the attention of the sacred lands, but it was different this time. The undead that entered the outer universe was not a small group, but an army of 100,000 or even 200,000. There were also undead in the outer universe, but the undead in the outer universe could not be compared to the undead in the interlayer universe. The weakest undead in the interlayer universe had the strength of the fourth realm. When hundreds of thousands of fourth-level and fifth-level undead powerhouses stepped into the outer universe, the amount of carnage they could cause was shocking. It should be known that the undead in the undead world, from birth to death, were always fighting. They fought and killed continuously, all for the sake of strengthening themselves. What they were best at was fighting and killing. The undead army is not only appearing in our Mount Taihao realm, there are also undead armies appearing in other Sacred Lands realms. There are even more terrifying demons appearing, and there seems to be traces of the Infernal Order and the Purgatory Demon Gate among them, Elder 5 said in a low voice. The Infernal Order and the Purgatory Demon Gate have been stirring up trouble ever since they revived. 1,000,000 years ago, it was precisely because of the Infernal Order and the Purgatory Demon Gate's rebellion that the universe was thrown into chaos, and the Sacred Lands worked together to suppress them. After 1,000,000 years, they have risen from the ashes. No matter what, before the universe is thrown into chaos, we must suppress the Infernal Order and the Purgatory Demon Gate as soon as possible. It would be best if we can eliminate them in one fell swoop, Elder 2 said in a cold and murderous voice, and a shocking sharpness filled the air. The Infernal Order and the Purgatory Demon Gate cannot be let go, but the current plan is to solve the undead invasion disaster first. Tell the Heavenly Sword Army to get ready and move out at full force. All the peaks and academies will do their best to cooperate, the Grand Elder finally said. The first senior statesman was one of the strongest in Taihao Mountain. He was one of the saints of Taihao Mountain and the only saint in the Senior Statesman Hall. The other senior statesmen were at most half-saint. There was a huge gap between them and the first senior statesman. As a result, the other senior elders wouldn't object to the decision the Grand Elder had made, nor did they have the right to object. The Heavenly Sword Corps had always been Mount Taihao's external military force. They carried out all kinds of dangerous missions, eliminated all kinds of hidden dangers and enemies, and maintained the stability of Mount Taihao. Taihao Mountain was a holy land and would naturally protect a corner of the universe. This was the territory of Taihao Mountain. Everything in this territory revered Taihao Mountain. The existence of the Heavenly Sword Army was to maintain the stability of the territory and eliminate all dangers. Now, the invasion of the undead army was a great danger, an extremely great danger. They had already invaded an entire continent, causing countless casualties. Countless people and cultivators had been killed by the undead army, turning into walking corpses and remnant souls. The people were in a terrible situation. If they weren't stopped in time, the undead army would spread out and invade other continents, causing even more casualties. Move out. The entire Heavenly Sword Corps was to move out. Anyone who was a member of the Heavenly Sword Corps had to move out and fight for this. As for the others, the people of the 36 Peaks and the 8 Academies couldn't be left behind. They had to provide great support. Even the 12 Sword Path Saints had to move out. Chen Zong was the captain of the Xian Division B 9th Squadron of the Heavenly Sword Corps. Although he hadn't returned to the Heavenly Sword Corps for a long time, his identity still existed. After returning to the Heavenly Sword Corps, the members were very excited to see their captain, Chen Zong, return. They knew very well that the current Chen Zong was different. Number 1 on the Divine Lord list. He was number 1 on the Divine Lord list and could be said to be the strongest Fourth Realm expert in the universe. Perhaps there were people who were comparable to Chen Zong in strength, but there were definitely not many of them. There were very, very few of them. After all, some Fourth Realm experts had no chance of being on the Divine Lord list because they were too old. However, it was undeniable that they had stayed in the Fourth Realm for a long time and studied it for a long time. They used time and energy to build themselves up, causing their strength to reach a very terrifying level. Even so, there were too few who could reach this step. After all, not being on the Divine Lord list when they were young meant that their talent wasn't that strong. Even if they stayed in the Fourth Realm for a long time, their improvement was limited. No matter what, the current Chen Zong could be said to be number 1 among the Fourth Realm experts in the universe. After greeting his team members, Chen Zong immediately led everyone and set off. They set off together with the Heavenly Sword Corps. The Tian Division, Earth Division, Xian Division, and even the Huang Division also joined in. The members of the Huang Division's Heavenly Sword Corps weren't weak. At least, they were much stronger than the average Fourth Realm expert. This time, it could be considered a test for them to join the Xian Division. Soon, a huge space-crossing divine ship was activated. It rose from the Heavenly Sword Peak and rapidly flew out of Taihao Mountain. Heavenly Sword Ship. This was the Sky Sword Corps' space-crossing divine ship, the Sky Sword Battleship. On the Sky Sword Battleship were the Sky Sword Corps' commander-level formidable martial artists. They were all 7th Realm formidable martial artists, as well as 6th Realm formidable martial artists. There were also quite a few 5th and 4th Realms among them. Following that, space-crossing divine ships rose from the various peaks and also flew out of Taihao Mountain. They were the experts of the 36 peaks and the 8 great academies. An undead army of hundreds of thousands was no small matter. In terms of numbers, Taihao Mountain couldn't compare to them. The difference was too great. However, Taihao Mountain also had its own advantages. Or rather, the cultivators of the outer universe also had their own advantages. The suppression of the outer universe would weaken the strength of the undead in the inner universe to a certain extent. The continent that had been invaded by the undead army was located at the very edge of Mount Taihao's territory. This was why Mount Taihao had been slow to receive the news. Otherwise, that continent wouldn't have been invaded by the undead army. Other than the experts of Taihao Mountain, There were naturally other Emperor-level and Emperor-level forces in Taihao Mountain's boundary. They couldn't just stand by and watch. They also had to make a move. Together, they were also a very powerful force. Advance. The experts of the various forces advanced from different directions on the continent. They didn't gather to face the undead army head-on. After all, the undead army was as large as 200,000. Even if some of them died, there were still hundreds of thousands left. It was very terrifying. Therefore, the different forces attacked from different directions. They launched flexible guerrilla warfare. Only by attacking from different directions could they better kill the undead and weaken the undead army's strength. When the Sky Sword Army arrived, the commander-level experts and the Sky Sword Army of the Tian Division moved out first. After entering the continent, because there were also 6th and 7th realm undead experts in the undead army, they needed to be strong enough to fight and even kill them. If they let the 5th and 4th level undead enter first, wouldn't they be dead if they encountered 6th or 7th level undead creatures? Let the 7th and 6th realm undead enter first, then the 5th and 4th realm undead. As for killing all the 6th and 7th realm undead to ensure the safety of the 5th and 4th realm undead, it was a beautiful idea, but it was very difficult to implement. Moreover, there was no such thing as 100% safety in the world of cultivators. If one wanted to carry out a mission, one would have to face possible dangers. Injuries were normal and death wasn't rare. Waiting. Chen Zong and the others waited quietly on the Sky Sword Divine crossing ship. Chen Zong also stared at the continent outside the Sky Sword Divine crossing ship. It was covered by a thick layer of death aura. Chen Zong felt that this death aura was very familiar. It was the death aura of the undead world. Infernal Order, Purgatory Demon Gate. Chen Zong's expression was cold and solemn. During this period of time, he only knew about the existence of these two evil forces. There was no doubt that these two evil forces were very powerful. They weren't inferior to the various Holy Lands. They could be called the two great evil Holy Lands. Even the two Holy Lands, Luofu Mountain and Myriad Net Valley, were destroyed by them. Not even a chicken or a dog was left. At that time, Luofu Mountain and Myriad Net Valley were completely unprepared, and they might even have had spies within them. However, as Holy Lands, they were tyrannical existences and were not weak in the slightest. Yet, they were still annihilated. This was enough to show that the Infernal Order and Purgatory Demon Gate were terrifyingly powerful. Luofu Mountain and Myriad Net Valley also had prodigies at the top of the Divine Lord list, but they were all dead. According to investigations, they were killed by the prodigies of the Infernal Order and Purgatory Demon Gate. However, there were no prodigies of the Infernal Order and Purgatory Demon Gate on the Divine Lord list. This was worth thinking about. Other than being wary of the Infernal Order and Purgatory Demon Gate, Chen Zong was also very interested in the prodigies of the Infernal Order and Purgatory Demon Gate. He wanted to see what kind of methods they had. Perhaps this would be a good opportunity. After all, it was said that the invasion of the undead world was caused by the Infernal Order. Perhaps there were prodigies of the Infernal Order on this continent. Wait for orders. Time flew. In the blink of an eye, half a month had passed. The order came. The Sky Sword Troop's Earth Troop moved out, while the Xian Troop continued to wait for orders. The Xian Troop continued to wait on the Sky Sword ship. The protective shield of the Sky Sword ship was activated at all times. Even a 7th Realm Emperor-level expert wouldn't be able to break it instantly. Moreover, they still had other methods to counterattack. While waiting, everyone didn't idle around. They were all cultivating. Even if the time was short, they couldn't waste it. If they could improve a little, they would improve a little. That was the best because strength was a guarantee. A guarantee to kill the enemy and a guarantee to survive. Another half a month passed, and the second order came. Let's go. The captains of the Xian troops, various troops, gave the order and moved out. One by one, they flew out of the sky sword ship and rushed towards the continent that was shrouded in the thick aura of death. Undead. The undead world army was among them, waiting for everyone to fight and kill. This trip might be life-threatening, and they might die, but no one retreated. Life should be glorious and death should be glorious. Remember the mobile version of the website, Chapter 102. Undead the Sky Sword Ship, page 1/1, bookmark for easier reading. Chapter 2791. The aura of death surged like a surging tide. Once they entered, they immediately felt the endless aura of death assaulting them from all directions. The will of death intertwined and ran amok here, making them feel extremely oppressed. There was a sense of oppression that came from the soul. Fortunately, none of them were ordinary people. They were all disciples of Taihao Mountain and were true elite. They had carried out many missions and had strong adaptability and resistance to abnormal situations. Therefore, they were not affected much. Of course, staying in a place like this for too long was not a good thing either. After each team entered this continent shrouded in death, they immediately dispersed. The mission of this trip was to kill the undead and even the people of the Infernal Order. The main purpose was to investigate why the undead army appeared here and then destroy it. After entering the continent shrouded in death, regardless of whether they killed the undead or the people of the Infernal Order, they would obtain the corresponding contribution points. Among them, killing a fourth realm cultivator would give 100 contribution points. It was 100 times more than killing a universe ferocious demon. It was not bad. Killing a fifth realm cultivator would give 1,000 contribution points. If they killed a sixth realm cultivator, it would be 100,000 contribution points. As for killing a seventh realm cultivator, it would be 10 million contribution points. Of course, for a fourth realm cultivator, killing a fifth realm, sixth realm, or seventh realm cultivator was not an extravagant hope. Killing more fourth realm cultivators was the way to go. A fourth realm cultivator was worth 100 contribution points. It was still very impressive. The more they killed, the more contribution points they could accumulate. It was very significant. The small teams quickly dispersed. There were advantages and disadvantages to doing so. The advantage was that they had high mobility and flexibility. They would also not attract a large number of undead because there were too many people. After all, the undead were very sensitive to vitality. The more people there were, the more vitality there would be. The stronger the fluctuations, the easier it would be to detect them. The disadvantage was that once they were surrounded by undead, the degree of danger would increase greatly. There were advantages and disadvantages. It all depended on the choice. However, the Heaven Sword Army had always acted in small teams. Dispersing in small teams was undoubtedly the most suitable method. With Chen Zong's current strength, he could definitely enter the Xian Division A team. However, Chen Zong had been staying on Tianguang Peak and did not go out on missions, so he did not get promoted. Now, Chen Zong led the members of the Xian Division B Team 9 as they flew across the land shrouded in death as the captain. The vitality of the 33 Fourth Realm cultivators gathered in one place. It was still very clear. To the undead, it was like a bright light guiding them. Soon, the walking corpses and remnant souls approached. These walking corpses and remnant souls did not come from the interlayer universe. They were formed after the humans and cultivators on this land were slaughtered by the undead army and corroded by the deathly energy. They were not very strong. Most of them were in the third realm, and a few were in the fourth realm. As for the fifth realm, there were even fewer of them. Killing these walking corpses and remnant souls would naturally give them contribution points. After all, the walking corpses and remnant souls were also undead. Once they left this land and were brought to other places, they would cause a lot of killing and casualties. The consequences were very frightening. Kill. The 9th Division B team immediately started a massacre, killing the walking corpses and remnant souls that came from all directions. The experts of the Celestial Sword Corps that had entered earlier would not take the initiative to deal with the weak undead. Their targets were the powerful undead. As for the weak undead, they would naturally leave them to the appropriate Celestial Sword Corps to deal with. Only then would they be able to train themselves. Fourth realm killing third realm undead could, of course, also give them contribution points. However, it was not much. A third realm undead was only worth 1 contribution point. It was better than nothing. Sword light flashed. Soon, hundreds of walking corpses and remnant souls were killed one after another. Sword will still had a terrifying destructive power against soul bodies like remnant souls. They could not resist it at all. Be careful. A large number of undead are approaching. Among the team, there were people who were better at scouting. However, Chen Zong's senses were more sensitive. He could usually sense it earlier and warn the team. After obtaining Chen Zong's size, the team members all became alert. As they focused their gazes, they saw a thick deathly energy sweeping toward them like flying clouds. Below the deathly energy was a group of skeleton clan warriors. Within the deathly energy was a winged skeleton. Fourth realm. In addition, there were fifth realm skeleton clan warriors among them. Leader, we can't fight them head-on. The team members' expressions changed drastically. They could still put up a fight against the fourth-level skeleton clan ghouls. In fact, they could even kill all of these fourth-level skeleton clan warriors with their powerful abilities and tacit cooperation. However, there were fifth-level skeleton clan ghouls among them. The difference between the fifth realm and the fourth realm was huge. Even if they joined forces to set up the 33 Heavens sword formation, they would probably not be able to do anything to the fifth realm. At most, they would be able to stall for a while before being killed. It's okay. You guys form the formation to deal with the fourth realm undead. Leave the fifth realm undead to me. Chen Zong's voice was very calm. However, there was a hint of fanaticism in his sharp eyes. Fifth realm. Chen Zong knew that his strength was extraordinary for reaching the fifth realm. However, he had never fought with a fifth realm elite before. Chen Zong really wanted to fight with a fifth realm elite. It would be best if he could fight with his full strength. Right now, it was a good opportunity. Moreover, Chen Zong did not sense any life-threatening danger from the fifth realm undead. This meant that he could really fight them. At the very least, he still had a trump card. Previously, the Tianguang Peak Lord had given him a type of sword principal source. The sword principal source and the sword principal source were of the same origin. However, there were differences. The sword principal source was like the mother body, while the sword principal source was like the child body. The sword principal source could not be used easily. Once it was used, it would hurt the sword principal source and leave behind hidden dangers. It would take a long time to repair and recover. However, the sword principal source was different. It was a power that could be regenerated. Of course, even 7th realm imperial level cultivators could only use their own sword principal source. If they wanted to refine it and reserve it for others to use, it was not an easy task. They would try to avoid it as much as possible. Therefore, every drop of the sword principal source was very precious. The Tianguang Peak Lord valued Chen Zong very much. He also valued Chen Zong's safety. Therefore, he had given Chen Zong 10 drops of his own sword principal source at once. Captain, this is too risky. The team members advised one after another. It was better to leave as soon as possible before the skeleton clan undead got close. It's fine. As soon as Chen Zong's voice fell, he immediately rolled up and turned into a ray of sword light. It was extremely sharp and piercing across the sky. The silvery white light condensed into a line, like the light of the sky tearing through the darkness. It was intense and brilliant. Kill! The team members had no choice but to charge out with their swords. They were in the same team as Chen Zong. They could not let Chen Zong kill his way over. If they ran away, that would be disobeying orders. Even if they returned alive, they would be punished by the Heaven Sword Troops' military rules. Now, they could only hope that the captain could fight against the Fifth Realm Skeleton Clan warriors. Otherwise, they would be done for. However, the captain was the number 1 on the Divine Lord list. The previous number 1 on the Divine Lord list, the God-destroying king, had the battle record of killing a Fifth Realm in a head-on battle. If the captain could defeat the God-destroying king, it meant that the captain's abilities were stronger than the God-destroying king's. He also had the abilities of a Fifth Realm. The undead from the interlayer universe were not the same as the undead from the outer universe. They had reached the Fifth Realm and all possessed a certain level of intelligence. When they saw that the Fourth Realm cultivator from the outer universe was advancing instead of retreating, they could not help but laugh strangely. It was as though their bones were colliding as they mocked Chen Zong. Although they were mocking him, these Fifth Realm Skeleton Clan undead had no intention of letting Chen Zong go. The figure of one of the Fifth Realm Skeleton Clan warriors flashed and immediately charged toward Chen Zong at an alarming speed. It immediately stirred up a terrifying death aura storm. Chen Zong's eyes were extremely sharp. He stared at the approaching Fifth Realm Skeleton Clan undead. His expression did not change, but his gaze became sharper. It was as though the tip of a sword could pierce through everything. Close in, draw the sword, and slash. The sword light broke through the air in an instant, turning into a silver-white crescent moon that cut across the sky. Its power was astonishing. Although it was already close to its limit, Chen Zong's swordsmanship was still improving little by little under his constant cultivation. The power of the sword when it was drawn was increasingly astonishing. Fast. The speed of the sword was extremely fast, and it struck the level 5 skeletal clan warrior right away. However, when the tip of the sword struck the level 5 skeletal clan warrior, a dull sound was heard. It was as if a wooden sword had struck bronze. Not only did the sword not break, but it was also shaken by the force of the impact, causing the sword to vibrate incessantly. The force contained in the sword also dissipated. Strange laughter rang out from the Skeleton Clan warrior. It was full of mockery. He was too naive to think that such an attack could hurt him. Chen Zong's expression did not change. He activated the silver sword body with all his might. The silver-white divine patterns covered his entire body. His entire person was like a god or a demon. His eyes became sharper. A silver light condensed in his pupils like the tip of a sword that was about to pierce through the sky. Immediately, Chen Zong struck again with his sword. The power of this strike was even more tyrannical. Not only did it block the opponent's attack, but it also exploded in an instant. He struck dozens of times consecutively. With his superb swordsmanship, he repeatedly slashed the Fifth Realm skeleton's body. With a cracking sound, the sturdy bones were immediately broken by Chen Zong. Although this Fifth Realm Skeleton Clan warrior was at the Fifth Realm, it was only an ordinary Fifth Realm skeleton. Although its strength was not weak, Chen Zong's strength was not so simple. With his full strength and superb swordsmanship, he decisively killed it. This scene immediately shocked the group of team members. A Fourth Realm Skeleton Clan warrior killed a Fifth Realm Skeleton Clan warrior. Although they had heard of it, they had never seen it with their own eyes. Now, it happened right in front of their eyes. Moreover, it was done by someone they were familiar with. Shocking. That feeling was incomparably shocking. It was a shock that shook their minds. The other Fifth Realm skeletons were also very shocked. A Fourth Realm cultivator could actually kill a Fifth Realm Skeleton Clan warrior. It was unbelievable. Kill him. His soul must be delicious. Chapter 2792. The Sixth Level of the Sword Sharpening Technique. The First Stroke of the Heart. In an instant, an extremely condensed silver-white sword ray pierced through the air. The moment the sword was drawn, it struck a 5th-level skeletal clan warrior. It pierced through the extremely hard skull like a hot knife through butter and pierced through the air. Generally speaking, the undead were not so easy to kill. Even if their bodies were shattered, as long as their soul fire was still burning, they would not truly die. There was even a chance for them to be resurrected after a period of time. However, they encountered Chunzong. After the first stroke of the heart pierced through the skull, Chunzong activated the power of the Black Mark, immediately absorbing and devouring the spirit of the skeleton clan warrior, destroying it directly and scattering its soul. By doing so, not only did he kill the skeleton clan warrior, but he also benefited the Black Mark. His own essence, energy, and spirit also received a little bit of feedback from the pure power, strengthening it little by little. However, by now, Chunzong also realized that his essence, energy, and spirit had reached an extreme level. Among the 5th realm, it was at least the top. The feedback he received from devouring the spirit of a 4th realm after killing it was difficult for his essence, energy, and spirit to improve again. It was the same even for 5th realm spirits, unless it was in large quantities. Even so, Chunzong would not waste it. It would always accumulate. Eventually, the quantitative change would lead to a qualitative change, breaking through the shackles and breaking through the limits to reach a higher and stronger level. Kill, kill, kill. Not long after, under Chunzong's full outburst, several 5th realm skeleton clan warriors were all killed by Chunzong. Chunzong received a few thousand contribution points in an instant. Seeing Chunzong's continuous display of power and killing 5th realm skeleton clan warriors, the other team members were greatly encouraged. Under the Sky Attack Sword Matrix, they continuously killed the 4th realm undead with astonishing efficiency. After Chunzong finished killing the 5th realm skeleton clan warriors, he did not stop. His sword gleam flashed, and in an instant, streaks of silver-white sword gleams fell like a storm, directly covering dozens of 4th realm undead. They could not block it. The bones of the skeleton clan were extremely hard and difficult to break. However, at this moment, under the silver-white sword gleams that Chunzong wielded, they were as fragile as tofu. One by one, they were defeated and killed. Chunzong's figure fell, and the sword gleams swept past like lightning, absorbing and devouring the soul fire of these undead at an astonishing speed. The team members did not feel it, all thinking that they were all destroyed by Chunzong's sword will. Not long after, over 100 undead were all killed by Chunzong's team, while the 9th Team B did not lose a single person. They were not even injured because Chunzong's strength was extremely tyrannical. Of 5th realm undead of the realm, the team members took elixirs to recover their strength and were amazed. Yan Qiu's expression was very complicated. He was a genius from the Gudao clan of the 4 main peak. He thought that he was very talented and had once competed with Chunzong for the position of team leader. However, he lost that battle and joined the Gudao clan of the 9 main peak. He wanted to challenge Chunzong better. As long as he defeated Chunzong, he could take the position of team leader. However, he did not expect that before he could issue a challenge, Chunzong had improved by leaps and bounds and displayed extremely terrifying strength. In the end, he even defeated the God-destroying king and was ranked first on the Divine Lord list. Now, he had even displayed terrifying strength that could kill a 5th realm expert in front of him. With such strength, not to mention him, even Wang Qiu, who was the best among the younger generation in the Gudao clan, could not be compared to him. There was a huge difference. Compared to Wang Qiu, there was also a huge difference. Because of this, Yan Qiu was very emotional and his emotions were very complicated. How many years had it been? After being emotional, what was left was only admiration, extreme admiration. He no longer had the slightest desire to compete. The gap was too big, like a moat that could not be crossed. Haha, go to hell. A majestic black-robed figure passed by and suddenly threw out a punch. That punch was extremely terrifying and could destroy mountains. It directly landed on the body of a fourth-level cultivator and instantly shattered his body into pieces. It was an extremely bloody scene. "All of you, go to hell, go to hell." As he spoke, he continuously threw out 2 punches. Streaks of black fist force with the power to break mountains blasted out in all directions and towards the Fourth Realm cultivators. These Fourth Realm cultivators were all experts from other Emperor-level and Emperor-level forces. They had entered this place only to deal with the army of the dead and the people from the Infernal Order. "Ha ha ha ha, Fourth Realm, who is my opponent?" The majestic figure laughed maniacally as he attacked. His tone was extremely arrogant. "Don't be so arrogant, demonic sex scum, take my sword." A cold voice was heard. At the same time, a lightning-like sword light cut across the sky. The speed of the sword was shocking, as if it was splitting the sky. The sword essence was extremely shocking and it was earth-shattering. "Swordsman from Taihao Mountain." The majestic figure in a black robe laughed loudly. He had no intention of dodging. Facing the lightning-like sword light, he suddenly threw out a punch. The sword light was shattered in an instant, and the lightning-like figure was hit as well. He was sent flying backward, blood spurting out of his mouth. His bones were shattered, and he fell hundreds of meters away. Like a boneless snake, his eyes bulged, and he died an unnatural death. 1 punch. With just 1 punch, a Fourth Realm swordsman from Taihao Mountain was killed in a direct confrontation. "Unparalleled swordsman, where are you? Come and let me kill you." The majestic man was domineering. His iron fists were invincible. Any Fourth Realm cultivator would die upon contact. It was extremely terrifying. Even 5th-level cultivators were no match for him and were killed in a few moves. "Seems like someone is calling me?" Chenzong seemed to have heard a voice from afar. It seemed like someone was shouting the words, "Unparalleled swordsman." However, because it was too far away, it sounded intermittent and very faint. There was also a lot of noise. However, Chenzong was sure that someone was calling him, and the words that were shouted were the words, "Unparalleled swordsman." Was there anyone else who was called Unparalleled swordsman? Chenzong didn't know, but he had a feeling that it was so. His eyes flashed. Chenzong immediately led the team and flew in the direction of the noise. As they got closer, the sound that Chenzong heard became clearer. Even the team members heard it. "Captain, is that calling you?" a team member suddenly asked. "It should be," Chenzong responded, but he was extremely vigilant. More than 10 days had passed since they entered this land that was shrouded in death. They constantly encountered undead creatures and killed them. However, the most they encountered were 5th-level undead creatures, and they were the more ordinary 5th-level undead creatures. They were all killed by Chenzong, and they were all souls of the dead under his sword. No, they couldn't even become souls of the dead. Not long after, Chenzong saw a very majestic figure shrouded in a black robe. Even the head was covered and the face could not be seen. "Sword cultivators of Taihao Mountain, do you know where Unparalleled Swordsman is?" The majestic black-robed man also noticed Chenzong and the others and immediately asked. His voice was as loud as a bell, and it contained a very terrifying power. It directly rushed over. Except for Chenzong, the other 32 people's faces changed drastically. They only felt their blood and chi surging. Their divine will was impacted, and their strength was actually chaotic. "Tell me where Unparalleled Swordsman is, and I'll leave you with an intact corpse." The majestic black-robed man's figure flashed and directly approached. A terrifying aura like that of a demonic beast directly attacked them. It made them feel as if they had fallen into a demonic prison, and their bodies were extremely cold. "Who are you?" Chenzong's expression changed slightly, but he calmly asked, "Why are you looking for Unparalleled Swordsman?" "I'm the 18th Holy Son of the Infernal Sect. The majestic black-robed man laughed and said, "I'm looking for unparalleled swordsmen, of course, to kill him. All of you back off." Chen Zong stared at the majestic black-robed man in front of him who claimed to be the holy son of the Infernal Order. Suddenly, the team members regained their mobility and quickly retreated, quickly distancing themselves. "I'm unparalleled swordsman." Chen Zong spoke again, revealing a smile. Chen Zong could sense that the majestic black-robed man in front of him was a strong opponent. Even the Fifth Realm warriors from the Skeleton Clan didn't give Chen Zong such a sense of danger. A Fourth Realm who could give him a strong sense of danger was no weaker than the God-destroying king. No, he might even be stronger than the God-destroying king. The Holy Son of the Infernal Order. Was this the foundation of the Infernal Order? Chen Zong didn't know, but since he had come across him, there was no reason for him to miss this opportunity. Fight! Chen Zong's words instantly stunned the majestic black-robed man. He was immediately overjoyed. He didn't expect unparalleled swordsmen to appear in front of him. He was really sending himself to his death. Hong! The black-robed figure abruptly punched out. The pitch-black fist force was incomparably condensed, as though it had been refined into an ancient demonic mountain. It contained an extremely terrifying might, capable of crushing everything in its path. Just this punch alone made Chen Zong feel a terrifying threat. Slash! Chen Zong suddenly slashed with his sword and performed the world sword principle. The extremely overbearing sword light broke the void and slashed directly at the demonic mountain-like fist print. Chen Zong intended to test the power of his opponent's fist skill. He wanted to pry into its mystery through direct contact. Suddenly, the sword light turned red. The demonic mountain-like fist print paused and its speed slowed down. It continued to attack, but Chen Zong avoided it easily. Amidst the rumbling, the ground behind Chen Zong was struck by the fist, and it shattered as if the ground was shaking. "You live up to your name as the number 1 on the Divine Lord ranking list. You do have some ability to survive my punch." The majestic black-robed man laughed heartily. Demonic aura surged out from his body and swept out in all directions. It was extremely terrifying. As his voice faded, he attacked once again. His fists were like a demonic mountain as they blasted out extremely terrifying fist imprints. The aura emitted by each fist imprint was several times stronger than the previous one. In an instant, Chen Zong was locked in by more than a dozen demonic mountain fist print. He felt that he was being sealed and suppressed in all directions. It was as if the space was imprisoned. Chen Zong couldn't help but be surprised. This fist skill involved the mystery of space. Strictly speaking, it was a branch of the way of space and an application. Not bad, it was really not bad. Chen Zong also performed his swordsmanship and immediately launched a fierce counterattack. Chapter 2793. The punch was like an ancient demonic mountain, filled with unparalleled vigor and dominance. It also contained traces of the mysteries of the Tao of space. It sealed off everything in the surroundings, making it impossible for people to dodge. They could only take it head-on. However, the power of the demonic mountain fist was extremely terrifying. The result of taking it head-on was usually being shattered. Most of the people who were killed before were in such a situation. They couldn't dodge or take it head-on. Chen Zong was different. Chen Zong, who had profound attainments in the Tao of space, could sense the mysteries of space in his opponent's punch. It wasn't the real Tao of space, but it was using the mysteries of the punch to draw on the mysteries of the Tao of space. For people who didn't comprehend the Tao of space, it was very mysterious. However, for Chen Zong, who had comprehended and mastered the Tao of space, it was nothing. He could easily see through it. He dodged and raised his sword to meet the attack. Heart Sword Technique and World Sword Technique were used alternately. Each had its own mysteries and was extremely powerful. For a moment, He wasn't at a disadvantage at all. The demonic son of Avicii was shocked. He had once killed the number 1 genius of Mount Luofu in a few moves. He was a genius ranked 9th on the Divine Lord list. His blade technique was exquisite and extremely powerful, but he was still no match for him. The difference was so great that the demonic son of Avicii felt that the Divine Lord list was only SOSO. If it weren't for special reasons, he would be ranked first on the Divine Lord list. He didn't expect the strength of the unparalleled Sword Monarch to be so extraordinary. One had to know that the demonic mountain fist looked simple, but it wasn't simple at all. Every move contained terrifying power and mysteries. Even 5th-level experts couldn't withstand it. He had killed several of them. The demonic son of Avicii became more and more excited. As his black robe fluttered, he suddenly punched out. The power of his punch doubled. The punch was like a demonic mountain that pushed forward, suffocating Chen Zong. His heart trembled unconsciously. The demonic son of Avicii's strength was too terrifying. He was completely superior to him. In a head-on collision, even if he used world sword technique, he was still inferior. Fortunately, the demonic son of Avicii's fist technique was powerful, but it lacked variety and technique. Therefore, Chen Zong could rely on his superb sword technique to contend with the demonic son of Avicii. 1 strength against 10 techniques. This was what it meant to be strong enough to defeat 10 skilled martial artists. Moreover, as they fought, Chen Zong also discovered that this person was a body cultivator. His physique was extremely strong, and his strength was unparalleled. As the terrifying fist print and sword technique clashed, the leaked energy overflowed and bombarded in all directions, shattering the hard ground around them. Holes and sword scars were blasted out, crisscrossing and shocking to the eye. The members of Team B9 had already retreated far away. They were all extremely shocked. That kind of power, how was it a battle between 2 fourth realms? It was clearly a battle between 2 powerful 5th realms. Not to mention them, even if an ordinary 5th realm cultivator were to approach, they would not be able to gain any advantage. You are the first person to be able to withstand my 100 moves Demon Mountain Fist and not die. The infernal son of Avicii instantly laughed out loud. In the 4th realm, no one could face him head-on. They could take his 100 demonic mountain fists without dying or even getting injured. Unparalleled sword master. Number 1 on the Divine Lord list. It seemed that he had underestimated the other party. Since that was the case, then he would use an even stronger fist technique to kill the other party. The black robe fluttered, and he instantly soared into the sky, turning into a figure. Like a ghost, he attacked with a terrifying force like a storm. The force was as strong as a mountain. He directly collided with the void, and it seemed like the void was about to be shattered. Not only that, Chen Zong felt that the void around him was solidified again. The flying momentum of the black robe also contained the mystery of the demonic mountain fist. Chen Zong did not dodge. With a flash of his sword, a silver-white crescent moonlight was drawn out. It was extremely sharp, and the silver-white color was so dazzling. The black robe was instantly slashed apart. However, after the black robe, an extremely majestic demonic shadow appeared. The demonic shadow soared across the sky, carrying a powerful force as it pounced towards Yi Shiwen. Boom! A single punch, an extremely terrifying punch, directly blasted out. That punch was like an ancient devil mountain that fell from the sky, blazing with terrifying devil flames that could incinerate everything. Even space itself seemed to be scorched by it. Chen Zong could tell that this punch still contained the mystery of the demonic mountain fist. It was an ultimate technique that was upgraded from the foundation of the demonic mountain fist. Its power had reached the level of a Sun-class ultimate technique. It was extremely terrifying, powerful, and ferocious. Under this punch, everything could be truly shattered. Heavenly light shattering stars. Without hesitation, Chen Zong also unleashed his power. He slashed out with his sword, and the silver-white sword light shattered the stars. In terms of reaction speed and the execution speed of ultimate techniques, Chen Zong was extremely fast. The sneak attack of the infernal son of Avicii was completely ineffective. Even if it was only for a moment, Chen Zong could unleash shocking power. Sword versus fist. Sun Class Ultimate Technique versus Sun Class Ultimate Technique. At that moment of collision, the sword light paused, and the fist energy paused as well. As if they were frozen, the two figures also froze. Like a painting, everyone could clearly see the appearance of the infernal son of Avicii after he took off his black robe. He was more than 2 meters tall, and he was only wearing a pair of black beast skin shorts. His muscular body was filled with bulging muscles, and his body was covered with black patterns. These patterns crisscrossed with each other, and they were distributed according to a strange pattern. It gave people a creepy feeling. After looking at him for a while, people would feel suppressed, uncomfortable, and dizzy. They had to move their eyes away and didn't dare to look at him anymore. Chen Zong also saw the appearance of the infernal son of Avicii clearly. It was a man with short hair that stood up like steel needles. His face was rough and ferocious, and his bulging muscles were filled with terrifying power. His body was also covered with black patterns that carried an indescribable mystery. Those were the demonic patterns. An extremely tyrannical aura spread out from the opponent's body. With his extraordinary senses, Chen Zong vaguely felt that the tyrannical power of the opponent should be related to the strange black patterns on the opponent's body. In just an instant, the sword light shattered, and the fist energy was destroyed. However, the aftermath of the explosion was extremely terrifying. It shattered everything in all directions and destroyed everything. Die, die, die. The infernal son of Avicii roared like a demonic beast. The demonic patterns on his body shone brightly, and the power emitted became more and more terrifying. It was as if a demonic beast had been hiding in his body and had awakened. The demonic patterns shone as if they were alive, and the power of each of the infernal son of Avicii's punches became even more tyrannical. In an instant, dozens of punches were launched. The infernal son of Avicii borrowed the power of the dozens of punches to shoot up into the sky. Then, his legs curled up, and his arms stretched out to hug his legs. His whole body curled up into a ball and rolled at an astonishing speed. Fall. In just an instant, the infernal son of Avicii turned into a dark meteor and fell from the sky. The long tail of black flames dragged across the sky as it slammed toward Chen Zong after dozens of terrifying fist energies that seemed capable of destroying the world. In just an instant, the area within 1,000 meters was shrouded by a terrifying power. It was as if it was suppressed, and the void was also completely imprisoned. Chen Zong felt that the void was sticky. The surrounding space was as viscous as water. No, it was even more viscous than water. It was like mercury, greatly affecting Chen Zong's movements. Moreover, this was due to Chen Zong's mastery of the Tao of space. If he had not grasped the Tao of space, he would have found it hard to move. Destruction. The great destruction had arrived. The dark meteor fell, and it would destroy everything. It would shatter the earth and collapse the void. From it, Chen Zong could feel the fluctuation of the divine spell. The infernal son of Avicii was indeed terrifying. Among all the opponents he had encountered, only the god-destroying king had mastered the divine spell. He didn't expect the infernal son of Avicii to have mastered the divine spell as well. Since that was the case, Chen Zong's eyes were extremely sharp. He lowered his body slightly, and his sword was already back in the scabbard. His eyes were fixed on the sky, on the falling dark meteor. He pulled out his sword. In just an instant, Chen Zong's energy, and sword seal, as well as the sword source of the sea-splitting sword, were consumed rapidly. They were all integrated into the body of the sword. As Chen Zong pulled out the sword with his right hand, all the power exploded in an instant. The heavenly light sword drawing method. This move was the divine spell of the sword Dao. It was the unique inherited divine spell of Tianguang Peak. Chen Zong had already comprehended and mastered it to a small success level. Its power was extremely powerful. The crowd only saw a flash of strong silvery white light shooting out from the scabbard at Chen Zong's waist. It was like an aurora, but it was also like the divine thunder that streaked across the dark sky. It was like the divine light of the absolute beginning that had opened up the chaos. In just an instant it released an unparalleled and shocking power. The sky was torn apart in an instant. Under the sword light, it was as if there was nothing in heaven and earth that could resist or block it. Everything would be torn apart and broken into pieces. When the sword light shot out, everything seemed to have stopped. It was as if everything had been solidified, turning into a unique picture scroll. The dark meteor that fell from the sky seemed to have been solidified in midair. The long tail of the dark flame was so magnificent and shocking. The silvery white sword light shot up to the sky as if it had split the sky. It hit the dark meteor directly. The collision instantly caused a destructive power that could shock heaven and earth to erupt. It destroyed everything. Everything seemed to have been destroyed. The sword light dissipated, turning into countless rays of light that sprinkled down. The dark meteor was also cut in half by Chen Zong's sword. It fell from the sky. The heavenly light sword drawing technique focused on the explosion. In an instant it gathered all the strength to erupt. The power that erupted was extremely terrifying. Under the explosion, it turned into an unparalleled sharpness that could cut through everything. It couldn't be blocked. Even if the demon son of Avicii used the divine spell, he still couldn't resist Chen Zong's heavenly light sword drawing technique or its sharpness. He was cut in half by the sword. The body of the demon son of Avicii fell from the sky. He was cut in half at the waist, but he wasn't completely dead. His body was constantly attacked by the sword energy, and his body was trembling and twitching. "If you kill me, you will die too." The demon son of Avicii stared at Chen Zong with a ferocious face. It was as if he was cursing. His voice was deep and mournful, like the roar of an evil ghost. The demonic patterns on his body suddenly flashed rapidly, faster and faster. "That has nothing to do with you." The moment Chen Zong's voice fell, the sword light flashed again. A sword slashed through the air, and the sword energy covered the area like a storm. It slashed the body of the demon son of Avicii, interrupting his self-destruction and shattering his body. Chapter 2794. Dead. The 18th demon son of the seamless demon cult had finally died. His hands were stained with the blood of countless fourth-boundary martial artists he had killed, and many of them were proud children of heaven ranked on the Divine Lord decree. The most powerful of them all was the #1 proud child of heaven of Mount Luofu, a powerhouse that had once been ranked 9th on the Divine Lord decree. But now, he was dead. He was killed by unparalleled Sword King, who was ranked 1st on the Divine Lord list. Although Chen Zong had successfully killed his opponent, this battle was not easy. In the end, he had to perform the heavenly light sword drawing skill to succeed. In other words, Chen Zong had used all his strength. The power of this demon son of Avicii was not inferior to that of the god-destroying king. Moreover, his opponent was the 18th demon son of Avicii. In other words, there were at least 17 demon sons of Avicii, or even more. If every demon son was so capable, the infernal order was indeed very scary. Another point was that the demon son of Avicii wanted to self-destruct in an attempt to drag Chen Zong down with him. However, self-destruction required some time. The demon son of Avicii tried to use words to disturb Chen Zong. Unexpectedly, Chen Zong's senses were extremely sharp and he sensed it. Without hesitation, he interrupted and killed the demon son of Avicii. However, after killing the demon son of Avicii, there was an unforeseen event. The demonic patterns on the demon son of Avicii's body entrenched themselves and turned into a strange pattern. The pattern flew directly towards Chunzong and landed on Chunzong's arm like a brand. Chunzong activated his power, but he could not get rid of it. Although he did not feel threatened, Chunzong did not think that such a thing would be beneficial to him. He could only suppress it for the time being. After leaving this place, he would ask the Emperor-level experts of the Sky Sword Troop to see if they could get rid of it. If they could not, he would have to look for the Doyens. After collecting the storage artifact, Chunzong did not look at it for long. He quickly circulated the Fiend God Sword Codex to recover his strength. The Fiend God Sword Codex could absorb all kinds of energy. It could even absorb the death chi here. It was very brilliant and overbearing. Therefore, in a place like this, Chunzong's seclusion would not be affected. All in all, with the Godly Demon Sword Codex with him, no matter what kind of environment or what kind of energy filled the surroundings, Chunzong could absorb and refine it with this superb technique and transform it into his own strength. After regaining his strength, Chunzong led his team members to continue their search for the undead. Previously, the level 7 and level 6 powerhouses had entered first and killed all the powerhouses among the dead spirits. Even if they hadn't killed all of them, they were still in pursuit. This was the outer perimeter, and the dead spirits weren't that strong. Most of them were level 4 and some of them were level 5. When the level 4 undead encountered Chunzong's team, they directly swept them aside. To Chunzong, killing level 4 undead spirits didn't consume much energy at all. Moreover, the Fiend God Sword Codex was constantly circulating, so the energy consumed would also be recovered in the shortest amount of time. Not long after, Chunzong's team encountered another batch of undead spirits. Among them were walking corpses and remnant souls. There were also undead powerhouses from the interlayer universe. There were even level 5 undead spirit. Fight. Kill. He immediately set up the 33 Heavens sword formation and fully combined everyone's strength to unleash an even more overbearing power. Unparalleled slaughter. 33 streaks of sword light were extremely dazzling. Under the continuous slaughter, it was like a violent storm, frenziedly killing. Even the level 5 undead spirits couldn't resist and were quickly killed. This was because Chunzong was very strong and could kill level 5 undead spirits on his own. When all the undead spirits were killed, everyone took out pills and consumed them, refining them to recover their strength. Chunzong was also recovering his strength. Although he didn't consume much energy just now, it was very necessary to ensure that his strength was at its peak at all times. In just an instant, a wisp of darkness silently spread over and shrouded everyone unknowingly. Apart from Chunzong, no one noticed it at all. After all, it was very dark here. It wouldn't be strange for it to be even darker. However, Chunzong felt it in an instant. The appearance of this wisp of darkness was very natural, but it gave him a feeling of danger. Danger was coming. In an instant, Chunzong's hair seemed to stand on end, and the space between his eyebrows was about to explode. Without any hesitation, Chunzong's figure flashed. At the same time, a wisp of dim light appeared. The dim light was as thin as an ox's hair, but it carried a terrible killing intent and directly pierced Chunzong's forehead between his eyebrows. Fortunately, Chunzong's reaction was fast enough and he dodged in time. What was pierced was only an afterimage, which was as real as a real afterimage. If he had been a breath slower, the space between his eyebrows would have been pierced. Chunzong did not dare to guarantee that he would have survived. That attack was truly too sinister and extremely terrifying. That kind of energy was extremely cold, as if it could freeze one's soul. After dodging, Chunzong wanted to fight back, but he found that he couldn't find the target. The fatal blow just now seemed to be fake, like an illusion. However, Chen Zong was sure that it was not an illusion. It was real, and it was a very terrifying blow. But he didn't know why. After he dodged the fatal blow, the attacker seemed to have disappeared, as if he had never appeared. "Everyone, back off!" Chen Zong shouted in a low voice as he tried his best to sense all the fluctuations around him. "You're dead for killing the people of the Holy Church." A fleeting voice suddenly sounded from all directions and entered Chen Zong's ears like a ghost. Immediately, Chen Zong knew the identity of the other party. They were from the Infernal Order. The people of the Infernal Order had always called themselves the Holy Church. Darkness filled the air. In an instant, a mysterious wave came and pierced towards Chen Zong again. This time, it was aimed at the back of Chen Zong's head. It was extremely fast, and the angle was extremely tricky. He didn't know where the attack came from. When Chen Zong dodged again, the other party's attack came from another direction and pierced towards the space between his eyebrows. It turned out that the attack on the back of his head was just a feint. This attack was the real killer move. It was fast, mysterious, and impossible to guard against. Even though Chen Zong's senses were very strong, he still felt a little tired of dealing with it. If it were someone with weaker senses than him, they wouldn't be able to dodge the other party's attack at all. He pulled out his sword, and the sword light suddenly flashed. In an instant, he slashed out and directly slashed through the other party's body. Or rather, it was a phantom that disappeared in a flash, but Chen Zong caught it. But the moment he slashed, Chen Zong could clearly feel that he didn't hit the other party. That phantom was just like an illusion. "Your attack is ineffective against me." The mysterious voice sounded again. It came from all directions, and he couldn't tell where it came from. "Which devil's son are you?" Chen Zong's heart skipped a beat, and he immediately asked. Not long ago, he killed the 18th devil's son, and now there was another devil's son. "I'm the 17th saint," the mysterious voice replied, and another attack came. In just an instant, 4 illusory figures appeared. The 4 figures were all covered in black robes, as if they were in between reality and illusion. They were unpredictable, and their auras were the same, difficult to sense. "Kill." The 4 figures instantly attacked. Chen Zong felt that they were all fake, but they were all real at the same time. They could turn from illusion to reality in an instant, but if he counterattacked, they would turn from reality to illusion again. They were like enemies that could be seen but could not be touched. They were even more difficult to deal with than the previous 18th Devil's Son. The 4 illusory figures attacked, but they all missed and disappeared. Then, 8 illusory figures appeared and attacked again. Chen Zong waved his sword and instantly blocked and shattered them. 16 illusory figures attacked. 32 illusory figures attacked. 64 illusory figures attacked. 108 illusory figures attacked. All directions were filled with black-robed illusory figures. They were densely packed like ghosts, constantly attacking and alternating between illusion and reality. It was difficult to distinguish between reality and illusion. When you thought it was fake, it would become real and launch a fatal attack. When you thought it was real and tried your best to defend, it would become fake again, making your efforts in vain. Chen Zong's expression was solemn. He raised his perception to the extreme. With a sword in hand, no matter what attack was launched, it would not be able to break through the defense of this sword. The sword was like the origin, completely indestructible. Under the superb defensive swordsmanship, all the attacks of the 17th Devil's Son of the Infernal Order were all blocked by Chen Zong. They could not really break through the defense of the sword circle at all, and hurt Chen Zong at all. In an instant, 108 illusory demonic shadows condensed in an instant, turning into an incomparably corporeal black-robed demonic shadow. It directly flew over at an extremely fast speed, as if it had transcended the gap in time, directly sweeping past Chen Zong's body. Fast. At that moment it was incomparably fast. What shocked Chen Zong was that it seemed to contain the mystery of the way of time. An 18th Devil Sun's fist technique contained the mystery of the way of space. A 17th Devil Sun's attack also contained the mystery of the way of time. This made Chen Zong more and more curious about the infernal order, and more fearful of it. When the illusory figure swept past his body, Chen Zong could not dodge. He only felt extremely cold all over, and an indescribable sense of heaviness came over him. His body seemed to weigh more than 10,000 pounds, and it was also very congested. It was as if a huge rock had been forcefully stuffed into his body. His vision turned black and dark, as if he was about to fall into a bottomless abyss, and his consciousness was sinking. In an instant, God's will and sword will burst out at the same time. Under the extremely terrifying power, the dark and cold feeling was also shattered in an instant. Chen Zong vaguely heard a mournful howl, as if it had suffered some kind of heavy injury. In the next moment, Chen Zong only felt that the heavy and congested feeling in his body suddenly disappeared. Waves of relief came over him for no reason. He felt as if his whole body was about to fly, and his consciousness that was about to sink into the abyss also returned to his body. This feeling was very good. Escaped. Chen Zong could feel that the danger had disappeared. He could not feel the slightest trace of the other party's aura around him. In other words, the 17th Devil Sun of the Infernal Order had left. Perhaps he was injured and did not dare to continue fighting with Chen Zong, for fear that his injuries would worsen. If he was not careful, he might even be killed by Chen Zong. Therefore, he could only escape first. Next, I will act separately from you, Chen Zong said to his team members. With your strength, as long as you are careful and don't take too many risks when working together, you should be able to protect yourselves. Chapter 2795. Something happened in the morning, so the update was late. An illusory figure flashed by at lightning speed and revealed itself. It was a skinny black-robed man who stood in the void like an illusion. Sword Sovereign Wushuang, you live up to your reputation as #1 on the Divine Lord list. Despite being struck by my Abyss Demon Shadow, you were able to escape and even injure me. The illusory figure's tone was erratic, but it was filled with surprise. Previously, he had discussed the Divine Lord list with the 18 Devil Sons. They had been dismissive of the geniuses on the Divine Lord list because both of them had killed geniuses on the Divine Lord list before. Moreover, they had killed more than one genius on the Divine Lord list. Killing them was as easy as killing chickens. Therefore, they did not pay much attention to the #1 Divine Lord list God-destroying king or unparalleled sword king. They always thought that they could easily be ranked #1 on the Divine Lord list with their own strength. He did not expect that he would fail to kill Unparalleled Sword King. Not only did he fail to kill him, but he also failed to unleash his full power. Not only did he fail to unleash his ultimate move, but he was also injured by the counterattack. Although he still had a trump card, he would not use it easily. Moreover, his opponent was #1 on the Divine Lord list, so he definitely had a trump card. He was not confident. The 17th Demon Son was not confident. This was the first person who had made him helpless. He was a very difficult opponent to deal with. If 18 encounters him, it will be very interesting, the 17th Demon Son thought to himself. The 17th Devil Son thought to himself. He still didn't know that 18 had already been killed by Chen Zong's sword. After separating from his team members, Chen Zong moved alone with his sword. Why did he do that? Because Chen Zong had speculated that the 18 demon sons that he had killed had left a demon mark on his arm. It could not be removed no matter how hard he tried. It was highly likely that it was a symbol that would be sensed by the people from the Infernal Order. Sensing the symbol meant that they knew that he had killed someone from the Infernal Order. It was a message to the people from the Infernal Order to take revenge. Chen Zong felt that his speculation would not be wrong. However, he didn't know how wide the detection range of the Mageweth symbol was. If it was very wide, then the Infernal Order could attack them at any time. It wouldn't be a good thing for the others. After fighting 2 opponents from Infernal Order, Chen Zong knew how terrifying they were. Once his team members went up against them, they wouldn't be able to resist at all and would be easily killed. Fortunately, the 2 demon children of the Infernal Order were targeting him and did not pay attention to the others. Otherwise, the other members would have been killed except for him. But if this was the case twice, what about the 3rd time? What if more Infernal Order members came and he couldn't kill them all in a short period of time? Wouldn't his teammates be implicated? At the end of the day, it was more dangerous for them to move together with him. On the other hand, it would be safer for them to leave. At least relatively speaking, it was impossible for them to be absolutely safe unless they left and returned to Taihao Mountain. Similarly, without his team members moving together, Chen Zong seemed to have broken free from his shackles. That's right, the 32 team members were a kind of restraint to Chen Zong to a certain extent. Why? It was because their abilities were too far apart from Chen Zong's. Although they were all emitters of the 4th realm, Chen Zong was at the 5th realm. On the other hand, they were only at the 4th realm. The difference was very obvious. His powerful abilities and confidence allowed Chen Zong to move around more nimbly and freely. With a sword in hand, he could kill any 4th realm undead in an instant and absorb their souls. Unfortunately, these were undead. Only their souls could be absorbed and there was no life force. Otherwise, the mysterious seed would be able to accumulate more power. Now, the mysterious seed had already grown its 3rd sprout under the constant accumulation of power. Its life force was so strong that Chen Zong was shocked. However, Chen Zong didn't know when this mysterious seed would truly grow. He also didn't know how much more life force it needed to absorb. This matter couldn't be rushed. Chen Zong could only restrain himself and slowly accumulate. Sooner or later, it would cause a qualitative change. The current plan was to increase his abilities first. The more powerful a life form was, the more life force it contained. Therefore, if he was strong enough, the life force he could absorb from killing a 6th realm life form would be hundreds or thousands of times more than that of a 4th realm life form. If he killed a 7th realm life form, the life force he could absorb would be tens of thousands of times more than that of a 4th realm life form. In the end, it was still strength. As long as he was strong enough, anything was possible. While searching for undead to kill, Chen Zong used the One-Hearted Sutra to comprehend sword techniques and the 5 Great Paths. Other than that, it was the One-Hearted Sutra. The One-Hearted Sutra was now cultivated to the 4th level. As for the 5th level, it was only in theory. At least, Chen Zong didn't inherit it. It seemed that his master, the One-Hearted Holy Man, had also cultivated to the 4th level and didn't have the 5th level. Maybe I should find a chance to go back. Firstly, I can visit my master. Secondly, I can discuss the follow-up of the One-Hearted Sutra with him, Chen Zong thought to himself. Chen Zong couldn't give up on the One-Hearted Sutra. The help it provided was too great. Of course, the 4th level was the limit. That was the limit now. However, Chen Zong wasn't satisfied with that. He always wanted to continue deriving it and raise it to a higher level. However, it was too difficult. His master, the One-Hearted Holy Man, had studied the One-Hearted Holy Man for many years. He must have studied the cultivation in the future. It was necessary for him to go back. Therefore, Chen Zong decided that he would find time to go back after he broke through to the 5th realm. Now that everything had been raised to the limit, although there was still some potential to be unearthed, it wasn't much. Perhaps after this trip, he would reach the true limit. That would be the time when he broke through to the 5th realm. In the valley, a large number of undead gathered. Among them, there were many 6th realm and even 7th realm undead powerhouses. The sword light was vast and mighty. It came from afar, and when it landed, it killed dozens or even hundreds of undead. They were all reduced to dust. However, in the next moment, a seventh realm undead exploded with a monstrous demonic aura. A shocking aura of death swept out, turning into a terrifying beast of death that swept through everything. Then, a skeletal giant hundreds of meters tall stood up. It towered between heaven and earth. The aura of death fluctuated endlessly, stirring up a storm. A great battle. Emperors and emperor-level powerhouses from various forces were advancing and fighting fiercely with the 6th and 7th realms of the undead army. Intense battles broke out all around the valley. The undead army came out from that valley. It should be the infernal order that opened a passage to the interlayer universe in that valley. Not far away, a emperor-level powerhouse looked down from the sky and vaguely saw the situation in the valley. Then, we just need to destroy that passage, another emperor-level powerhouse beside him said in a serious tone. I'm afraid it won't be that easy to destroy, a third emperor-level powerhouse said. Although they hadn't entered the valley yet, they could feel that the valley was filled with an endless aura of death. The thick, deathly silence was like a tide. It was enough to show that there were very powerful undead powerhouses overseeing the valley. For example, they were all top Emperor-level powerhouses. They weren't on the same level as the Emperor-level powerhouses who were fighting. There were also undead powerhouses like them overseeing the valley. There might even be an undead monarch. So, how could they destroy it? With their super-strong senses, they could still faintly feel a malice emanating from the valley. It was a very obscure malice, but it made them feel cold all over. It was impossible for Emperor-level powerhouses to make them feel this threatened. It was at least a half-saint or even a saint. With their strength, they couldn't even deal with a half-saint, let alone a true saint powerhouse. We can only ask a saint to take action. Just as the Emperor-level powerhouse's voice fell, in an instant, darkness spread out of thin air, covering all directions and shrouding everything. Regardless of whether it was the cultivators or the undead, all of them fell into the darkness as if they were being devoured. An incomparably cold aura spread out in all directions, directly penetrating the bodies of all the cultivators. All the cultivators felt that their powers were suppressed, and their chi and blood seemed to have been frozen. Even their spiritual souls seemed to have been blinded. Their essence, chi, and spirit suffered a strong impact. Their consciousness seemed to have sunk, turning them into walking corpses. However, only the cultivators were affected, and the undead were not affected in the slightest. What is this? What a terrifying power! The Emperor-level powerhouses burst out with their strength to resist the invasion of this strange power, and were extremely shocked. This should be the endless demon domain. An ancient Emperor-level powerhouse said, "This is a special technique of the infernal order. In the endless demon domain, all enemies will be suppressed, sink, and finally be at the mercy of others." The endless demon domain was spreading out at an astonishing speed. It would only take a short period of time to spread to the entire continent and completely cover it. When that time came, the cultivators on the continent would very likely be suppressed, sink, and finally be killed, causing incomparably heavy losses. A backup plan. In an instant, the Emperor-level powerhouses understood that this was the backup plan that the Infernal Order had prepared, a backup plan that was specially prepared to deal with the cultivators. If they died here, not only Taihao Mountain, but all the other forces would also suffer heavy losses. In the blink of an eye, an extremely sharp ray of light appeared above the darkness that was spreading at an astonishing speed. In the blink of an eye, that ray of light pierced through the darkness and spread out at lightning speed. It was as if an unparalleled sword was tearing the darkness apart. The sword was like a divine light, and the darkness was like a cloth that was directly torn apart. 10 meters, 100 meters, 1,000 meters, 10,000 meters. Then, the entire darkness was directly torn apart, and an incomparably stunning sword light also shot down, directly blasting into the valley that was filled with the undead army. The sword light was brilliant and vast, and the sword will was unparalleled, earth-shattering and earth-shattering. That sword was full of destruction, destroying everything, but in it, there was also an indescribable vitality that was extremely exuberant. Chapter 2796. The darkness spread like a raging tide at an astonishing speed, swallowing everything. Chen Zong's expression changed greatly, and he retreated without hesitation. Chen Zong's strong perception told him that once he fell into the darkness, it was not a good thing. It was very likely that he would lose his life because of it. However, Chen Zong retreated very quickly, but the darkness spread even faster. Even if Chen Zong used all his strength to retreat, he could only buy himself some time. In the end, he was inevitably swallowed up by the darkness. The moment the darkness attacked him, Chen Zong immediately felt that his active strength became sluggish, as if he was about to fall asleep and become lifeless. His vigorous qi and blood were also sluggish, as if he was very tired and did not want to move. His extremely strong essence, qi, and spirit also seemed to be weakened. His consciousness fell, as if he was about to fall into a bottomless abyss. Countless illusions also attacked him. Even though Chen Zong's divine will and sword will were strong, he could only barely resist for a while. If this continued, it was only a matter of time before he really fell into the endless illusions. Break free! Chen Zong kept exploding, urging his essence, qi, spirit, and sword will and divine will to resist and retreat with all his strength. Even if he was facing a desperate situation and had one foot in the abyss, he would never give up. As long as there was a glimmer of hope, he would seize it and fight with all his strength. However, the infinite demon zone was too strong. Even an emperor-level expert would find it difficult to resist, let alone Chen Zong. Just as Chen Zong was about to fall, a flash of sword light descended from the sky and directly tore the darkness apart, destroying everything with the mystery of destruction and rebirth. The sword light was as mighty as the true flames of the sun. It was invincible, expelling demons and evils. The sword light was unparalleled, and endless. It carried unparalleled power and slashed at the valley full of undead spirits. Under the shocking power of the sword, the undead spirits in the valley roared, full of fear. The sword light, sword will, and sword will were as mighty as the true sun across the sky, expelling all evils. It was even more effective against and harmful to the undead spirit. Annihilation, pulverization. The soul flames of the dead souls under the sword power were extinguished one after another. Their bodies also disintegrated, turning into countless withered bones that fell and piled up on the ground. This sword light brought endless death to the undead, but it brought endless hope to the cultivators. Swathes of undead fell like wheat being harvested. Soon after, a terrifying roar resounded from the valley. Soon after, an incomparably huge arm charged out of the valley. The arm seemed to be formed from skinned flesh and tendons. However, upon closer inspection, one would discover that it was actually formed from countless skeletons in a nearly perfect structure. It was filled with a monstrous demonic might. The huge skeletal arm rose to the sky, as if it wanted to pluck the stars and grab the moon. It stretched out its 5 fingers and suddenly grabbed at the sword light that was descending from the sky like the mighty power of the true sun. Collision. The moment the huge sword light and the huge arm came into contact, the two completely different powers instantly clashed violently like fire and water. Terrifying shockwaves wreaked havoc in all directions, sweeping across the sky as if they were going to turn everything into dust. In an instant, the darkness was completely torn apart, destroyed, and completely turned into powder and disappeared. The incomparably strong light, carrying a terrifying vastness and the divine power of death, swept across, making a series of ear-piercing roars that swept in all directions. Tremble! Everyone was trembling. This force was too terrible. In front of it, even a half-step saint could not resist. Even an Emperor Realm expert was as fragile as an ant. Once hit, he would be directly turned into ashes. Chen Zong stared at the explosive power in the sky. His eyes widened, reflecting the endless light in his pupils. The shock in his heart was indescribable. Regardless of whether it was the sword light just now or the collision and explosion now, the terrifying power and profoundness contained within them brought incomparable shock to Chen Zong. This touch went straight to the depths of his soul. The earth-shattering explosion shattered the space, revealing a pitch-black darkness that spread rapidly. It was like the open mouth of a cosmic beast, about to swallow everything directly. In the next moment, a 100-meter-long sword light cut through everything. It rushed out of the continuous explosive power and directly cut into the valley. Compared with the previous sword light, this sword light was undoubtedly many times smaller. It was only 1%, but the power contained in it was extremely terrible. It was not inferior at all, like a kind of condensation of essence. Seeing the sword light cut out from the countless spatial cracks and directly cut down, the fierceness and sharpness of it immediately brought a great deal of emotion to Chen Zong. It was as if what the sword light cut was not only the chaotic power and spatial cracks, but also the shackles and bottlenecks in Chen Zong's heart. In an instant, the sword essence rose and reached the extreme in an instant. Then, it broke through the limit, becoming more and more tyrannical, sharp, and destructive. Chen Zong seemed to feel that all the shackles on his swordsmanship and sword principle had been cut through. Cut through, break through, and advance. Although he did not make a move, Chen Zong knew that his basic strength had been further enhanced. Of course, his overall strength had also been improved to a certain extent. Limit. Chen Zong felt that the real limit was his real limit in the fourth realm. It was time to break through to the fifth realm. However, the current situation was not suitable for a breakthrough. He could only wait until he left here and returned to Taihao Mountain to make a breakthrough. The 100-meter-long sword light cut down. It was unstoppable and directly cut into the valley. It directly cut into the 100-meter-long vortex in the valley, which was the passage to the interlayer universe. Break. It only resisted for a moment. The vortex was directly cut through, and the passage from the outer universe to the interlayer universe was also destroyed. The undead could no longer reach here from the interlayer universe. The moment the vortex passage was cut through, there seemed to be a mournful and indignant roar, full of anger and hatred. As the portal to the interlayer universe was cut through, the deathly aura and silence in the valley began to fade. With the passage of time, it would disappear. Many black-robed figures took the opportunity to escape at the fastest speed. They were the members of the Infernal Order. Is that the sword power of the Taihao Sword Saint? A black-robed figure, who seemed to be standing in the depths of the void, stared at the dissipating sword light and muttered to himself. His tone was full of deep fear and an indescribable excitement. They never thought that this operation would attract a monster like the Taihao Sword Saint. It seemed that the Taihao Sword Saint had not made a move for many years. He had not even shown his face. Although the operation had failed and the Seamless Demon Cult had suffered some losses, it was still worth it to witness the shocking sword power of the Taihao Sword Saint with their own eyes. At the very least, they knew that if they really wanted to attack the Taihao Mountain, they had to have the ability to deal with the Taihao Sword Saint. Otherwise, everything would be destroyed under the shocking sword power of the Taihao Sword Saint. The undead army was completely destroyed, and the portal to the interlayer universe was also destroyed. The Infernal Order's operation was considered a failure. Although it failed, it also caused a lot of casualties. There were countless deaths and injuries, including the various forces involved in this operation. All of them suffered different degrees of damage. Taihao Mountain's losses were not small either. This was something that could not be helped. When faced with a strong enemy, trying to eliminate them would result in such a result. Only with greater strength could one ensure one's safety. For example, the Taihao Sword Saint was able to destroy everything with a single stroke of his sword. Even Lord Minggu, who was in the middle layer of the universe, was unable to withstand the attack and was directly injured. Even the portal was destroyed. The loss was severe. After all, it had mobilized a vanguard army of 200,000. For Sovereign Minggu, 200,000 vanguard army was not a small number. Now, the gains were not as great as the losses. However, there was nothing that could be done. The Taihao Sword Saint was too strong. He was one of the strongest in the outer universe. With a sword in hand, he was a super-strong existence that could suppress everything. He was not comparable to the average saint-level powerhouse. The undead army was destroyed, and the Infernal Order's plot was destroyed. The people of the various forces retreated. As for the continent, it had been reduced to a land of death. Ordinary cultivators would find it difficult to survive in such a place, let alone ordinary people. This meant that for a long time to come, this continent was destined to be a land of death with no signs of life. It was uninhabited. The heavenly sword was activated and quickly left this land of death, flying in the direction of Taihao Mountain. Chen Zong looked at the members of his team with a heavy expression. Death. 6 members of Team B's 9th team had died. This loss was not small, but Chen Zong was powerless to reverse the situation. He took a deep breath and dispelled the feeling of powerlessness bit by bit. Finally, the heavenly sword crossed the void universe and returned to Taihao Mountain, landing on the heavenly sword peak. Everyone disembarked from the heavenly sword peak. Chen Zong did not continue to stay on the heavenly sword peak. Instead, he returned to Tianguang Peak. After that, Team B's 9th team needed 6 more members to be able to carry out the mission again. However, Chen Zong did not care about these matters. Instead, he quickly left and returned to Tianguang Peak, preparing to stay behind closed doors and break through to the 5th realm. Now, everything about him had been raised to the limit of the 4th realm. This was the true limit. Even if he stayed here for 10 or 20 years, he would not be able to reach the limit of improvement. Even if he obtained a good opportunity, it would not bring him much benefit. This was the time for a breakthrough. Breaking the shackles, breaking the limit, and ascending to a higher level would be a new beginning. This was the path that all cultivators pursued, the path of continuous self-improvement. This time, Chen Zong also obtained a lot of contribution points from killing the undead. In total, there were more than 100,000 contribution points. More than 20,000 of them came from the undead of the 5th realm. However, more than 100,000 contribution points were not a lot for the current Chen Zong. It was not enough to exchange for anything useful to him. Then, it was time for him to stay behind closed doors. Chapter 2797. Breaking through from the 4th realm to the 5th realm required an opportunity. Even though Chen Zong had already pushed everything in the 4th realm to the limit and dug to the limit, he still couldn't break through and ascend in one go. Instead, he needed the guidance of an opportunity to achieve a true breakthrough. Even someone as strong as Chen Zong could not avoid this. Chen Zong did not do any special training. Instead, he emptied his mind and relaxed his body. He let his essence, energy, and spirit be in a relaxed state without dissipating. This was a state of relaxation but not dissipation. His mind was also blank. He did not care about the passage of time, nor did he care about anything in the outside world. He completely ignored it. This was the most common and effective way to find an opportunity. When an opportunity appeared, he just had to seize it and break through. As for how long it would take for an opportunity to appear, it was not clear. Some people might need decades, while some people only needed a few days. This had nothing to do with talent. Sometimes it was just luck. Time passed slowly. In the blink of an eye, a year had passed. Chen Zong's mind was still blank. 2 years passed, 3 years passed. Year after year, time flowed like water. In these few years, many things had happened in the universe. The Infernal Order and the Purgatory Demon Gate had never stopped their actions, causing many casualties and chaos. However, on the whole, they were suppressed. The impact was not that great. However, all the Holy Lands knew very well that this was just a prelude. If they did not completely suppress the Infernal Order and the Purgatory Demon Gate, chaos would spread sooner or later. In the end, it would evolve into great chaos. Therefore, with the various major powers led by the various Holy Lands, they were all making corresponding preparations for the great chaos that had yet to arrive. The Infernal Demon Cult and the Purgatory Demon Gate were too strong. They were on the same level as the two Holy Lands. It wouldn't be easy to destroy them. Moreover, the location of their headquarters was also extremely dangerous. It was difficult to attack them. This meant that the arrival of great chaos was inevitable. Other than that, many forces had joined the Infernal Order and the Purgatory Demon Gate for various reasons. Among them, there were also some rogue cultivators. This had indirectly increased the overall strength of the Infernal Order and the Purgatory Demon Gate. Other than the Infernal Order and the Purgatory Demon Gate, there was another force that gave people a headache: the God Worship Cult. The God Worship sect was even more mysterious than the Infernal Order and the Purgatory Demon sect. Many people had joined the God Worship sect and became its members. However, compared to the Infernal Order and the Purgatory Demon sect, the God Worship sect was even more mysterious and difficult to find. The emergence of the sect of God had made the chaotic situation even more chaotic. Undercurrents were surging. This year was Chen Zong's 6th year of closed-door training. His divine soul was blank, and his consciousness seemed to be drifting in the void, wandering endlessly. Suddenly, a speck of light appeared. As soon as it appeared, it became blazing and powerful like a star. In the end, it became as dazzling as the sun. Opportunity! That was the light of opportunity. Without any hesitation, Chen Zong immediately grabbed it. When the light of opportunity was grabbed by Chen Zong, a kind of enlightenment emerged. It was time to break through. It was time to break through. In an instant, the eyelids that had been closed for 6 years trembled and opened instantly. 2 extremely sharp lights also burst out, piercing through everything as if they were piercing through the sky. His long hair fluttered, and every strand of his hair was condensed with an extremely shocking sharpness, like sword energy that could pierce through everything. The monstrous sword will burst out in an instant, shooting up to the sky. The secret room was shaking, and the formation was operating, covering all the power. However, the breakthrough had already begun. The will of the universe also felt it. The wind and clouds were mighty, and the boundless power began to sweep in from all directions. Rumble! The boundless vitality of the universe swept in from all directions of the Taihao Mountain and gathered at the Tianguang Peak. The scene was like the water of a long river flowing endlessly, turning into rolling and majestic waves, sweeping in endlessly. What's going on? Why is the vitality of the universe so violent? In the Taihao Mountain, the powerhouses were all alarmed. They immediately appeared and looked up at the sky, watching the vitality of the universe flowing endlessly like a long river, surging in from all directions. That's the direction of the Tianguang Peak. It seems that someone is breaking through. The Tianguang Peak Lord and a group of elders were also alarmed. Finally, their gazes locked onto a secret room behind closed doors. Is he finally going to break through? The Peak Master of Tianguang let out a big smile. He knew who was in the secret room behind closed doors. Chen Zong, the #1 genius of Tianguang Peak, the #1 powerhouse on the Divine Lord list, the unparalleled swordsman Chen Zong. He was about to break through to the 5th realm. Once he broke through to the fifth realm, Chen Zong's strength would become even more powerful. This was beneficial for Tianguang Peak, and it was also very beneficial for Chen Zong. The vitality of the universe was vast and mighty, like the ocean currents, gathering in the sky above the Tianguang Peak. The storm swept over, and the thunderbolts surged, as if they were going to destroy everything and the world. The rumbling sounds kept exploding, as if they were going to shatter the void and split the Tianguang Peak into pieces. An astonishing pressure descended and pressed down. In an instant, the endless qi of the universe flowed in reverse and turned into an extremely intense ray of light. It was as if it was going to destroy everything. It directly blasted towards the secret room where Chen Zong was in seclusion. The array and everything else in the secret room existed in vain as the ray of light poured into it. Chen Zong in the secret room was also hit by the heavenly light transformed from the vitality of the universe. His whole body trembled uncontrollably, and his whole body was wrapped up by the heavenly light. The extremely rich aura of the great Tao also spread from all directions, instantly increasing and becoming extremely rich, gathering around Chen Zong's body. This was the Tao energy, countless Tao energy, which Chen Zong could comprehend carefully. The Tao energy kept condensing and strengthening, reaching an astonishing height. The divine power of the universe covered 999,999 miles. It was extremely huge, and such an area made people tremble with fear. The disturbance caused by breaking through to the sixth realm can't even compare to this. Many Emperor Realm swordsmen sighed inwardly, shocked. It was too amazing. This divine power of the universe was indescribable. Under the divine power of the universe, Chen Zong was not only wrapped up by a huge amount of extremely pure vitality of the universe, as if he had turned into a big cocoon, but he also directly comprehended the mystery of the origin of the great Tao, which was the origin energy of the condensed Tao energy to the extreme. The origin of the great Tao could allow Chen Zong to comprehend the mystery of the great Tao more directly. The Sword Tao Seal, the Heart Tao Seal, the World Tao Seal, the Space Tao Seal, and the Time Tao Seal appeared one after another and began to break through. The realms of the great Tao were divided into beginner, small success, great success, and perfection. The third realm of the great Tao was the beginner realm. The fourth realm of the great Tao condensed into a Tao Seal was equivalent to the small success. Only the fifth realm was qualified to raise the comprehension of the great Tao to the great success or perfection level. However, the average fifth realm great Tao was at the great success level. Only the very top fifth realm could comprehend the great Tao to perfection level. The gap between the great success level and perfection level was huge. The Tao Seal was the small success level of the great Tao, and the great success level of the great Tao was called the Tao Palace. When breaking through from the third realm to the fourth realm, the evolution of the great Tao had a name, the Tao Seal, which meant condensing a Tao Seal. When breaking through from the fourth realm to the fifth realm, there was another name for the breakthrough of the great Tao, Tao Palace Expansion, which meant opening up a Tao Palace. When a Tao Seal opened up a Tao Palace, it was a huge leap and a huge improvement. Now, Chen Zong was opening up a Tao Palace. Moreover, it was not one Tao Palace but 5 Tao Palaces. How did one open up a Tao Palace? It was to shatter one's own Tao Seal and turn it into a small Tao Palace. Although the Tao Palace was not big, it could contain more pure and powerful great Tao energy. It was 10 times more than a Tao Seal. This was one of the reasons why one's strength would increase by leaps and bounds after breaking through from the fourth realm to the fifth realm. The other reason was the transformation of one's cultivation strength. The cultivation strength from the fourth realm to the fifth realm was also a leap. One's essence, vitality, and spirit would also be strengthened to a shocking level. In this way, one's comprehension and control of the great Tao would increase, and it would be easier for one to master the ultimate techniques of the great Tao. It wasn't hard to master low-grade and mid-grade Sun-class secret technique. Only top-grade, and super-grade Sun-class secret techniques weren't easy to master. However, top-grade, and super-grade Sun-class secret techniques weren't easy to master. However, top-grade, and super-grade Sun-class secret techniques weren't easy to master. Powerful 5th Realm masters could master top-grade, and super-grade Sun-class secret techniques, and even divine spells. For example, the masters on the God King list. With the help of the Heart Sutra, Chen Zong's 5 Dao seals were undergoing an internal transformation. It seemed like they were shattered, but at the same time, they didn't seem to be shattered. In fact, their insides were already shattered, and they were being reconstructed with a more perfect structure. At the same time, the Godly Demon Sword Codex continued to operate, absorbing the essence energy of the universe into his body and refining it quickly, causing his cultivation strength to transform. Originally, Chen Zong's cultivation strength was not inferior to that of a typical level 5 cultivator. Now that he continued to transform and strengthen, once the transformation was complete, his cultivation strength would double and reach a new height. Perhaps he would not be able to compare to a level 6 cultivator, but among level 5 cultivators, he would definitely be at the top. After all, the gap between the 5th realm and the 6th realm was too big. The gap was more than 10 times bigger than the gap between the 4th realm and the 5th realm. It was hard to calculate. There were 3 lists in the universe: the Godly General list, the Godly Lord list, and the Godly King list. However, there was no Godly Royal list, and there was no Godly Emperor list. This was because the 6th realm involved the origin, and the will of the universe couldn't forcefully interfere like before. The breakthrough was still continuing, and his cultivation strength was transforming. His 5 Dao palaces were being opened, and his sword techniques, ultimate techniques, and divine spells were all being comprehended and improved. His essence, vitality, and spirit were constantly being strengthened, and the power of his mind was also increasing. The mysterious seed also took this opportunity to continuously devour the power of the universe. Chapter 2798. The divine power of the universe covered 999,999 miles. It was like a huge whirlpool that spun wildly. Not only did the people of Taihao Mountain know about this, but even the experts of the other forces in the territory of Taihao Mountain could feel it. Who's breaking through? The 6th realm? Within the territory of Taihao Mountain, there were still spies of the Infernal Order and the Purgatory Demon Gate lurking, spying on all kinds of information. Once they had the chance, they would create some chaos. In a palace deep underground, a light suddenly lit up. It looked like fire, but at the same time, it wasn't fire. A statue with a human body and an eagle face stood in the middle of the palace. It was at least 100 meters tall, and the aura it gave off was extremely strange and terrifying. In an instant, the eagle-faced eyes lit up and shot out 2 rays of green light that were extremely sharp. They pierced through the sky and tore apart the darkness as if they were piercing through the endless space and time. They stared at the place where the divine might of the universe gathered within 999,999 miles. My people, bring this person before this god. At the same time, in the other underground palaces, caves, and void palaces, there were also statues of different kinds. Some had dragon heads and human bodies, some had snake heads and human bodies, and they all felt the vast divine power of the universe and issued orders. In an instant, countless gazes gathered on Taihao Mountain, or rather, on Taihao Mountain, the person who was breaking through. Taihao Mountain didn't deliberately seal off the area, so after all kinds of probing, they finally found out that the person who caused such a great divine power of the universe to break through was the current number 1 on the Divine Lord list, unparalleled Swordlord Chen Zong. The power of breaking through from the fourth realm to the fifth realm was greater than that of breaking through from the fifth realm to the sixth realm. Except for the lack of a universal calamity, everything else was greater than that of breaking through from the fifth realm to the sixth realm. As for the universal calamity, it was something that had to be experienced to break through to the sixth realm. The greater the commotion caused by the breakthrough, the greater the talent and the more solid the foundation. Chen Zong's commotion was so great because of the blessing and amplification of the universe's will of the number 1 on the Divine Lord list. Even so, it was enough to show how amazing he was. Once such a person successfully broke through, his strength would soar by many times. It was hard to describe. His cultivation path in the future would also be smoother and more astonishing. For the Taihao Mountain, it was a good thing. Perhaps in the near future, there would be another expert who could decide the outcome of the battle. For the other forces that were not part of the Taihao Mountain, it was not a good thing. However, in the current situation, it was not a bad thing either. For the Infernal Order, the Infernal Demon Gate, and the others, it was an extremely bad thing. Very soon, both the Infernal Order and the Purgatory Demon Gate had decided to kill him before he truly matured. No, perhaps there was another way, which was to capture him alive and bring him back to the Infernal Order and make him one of their own. That would undoubtedly be an even better thing. Chen Zong did not know that his breakthrough to the fifth realm would attract so much attention and hostility. Very good. In a place in the Taihao Mountain, which was located within the Taihao Mountain, but also seemed to be independent of the Taihao Mountain, a figure stood tall, like a giant sword pointing to the sky, exuding a vast sword will. It was like the true sun across the sky, bringing destruction and rebirth. A pair of clear, deep, and blazing eyes penetrated through the endless space and time, seeing through all the illusions, and stared directly at Chen Zong. But just this level is not enough. In the secret chamber, Chen Zong's body was completely wrapped in the essence of the universe. Endless essence of the universe constantly seeped into Chen Zong's pores, changing Chen Zong's cultivation base and power in essence. The 5 great Tao seals had completely changed. It was as if they had been split open from the inside, and they had turned into miniature palaces. Every single line on the palaces was extremely clear, and every single part of the structure was extremely precise. They were lifelike and contained boundless profundities. Opening up the palace was the first step to the great path. The palace was also divided into different realms, just like the seal of the way. There were entry, small success, great success, and perfection. However, there was another level above the perfection realm of the seal of the way, which was the extreme realm. However, there was no extreme realm in the palace. The perfection realm was the limit. After the perfection realm was the next realm of the great path, which was also the perfection realm of the great path. Generally speaking, the palace that had just broken through to the fifth realm was the entry realm. It was very simple and crude. Although it was called a palace, it was as simple as a thatched house. After that, the cultivation of the great path was to continuously perfect and strengthen the palace until it reached the limit. Starting from a thatched house, it was built into a wooden house and then a stone house. Step by step, it was built into a real palace of the way. With his extremely high perception and solid foundation, as well as the assistance of the Heart Sutra and the care of the universe's divine might, Chen Zong's speed and efficiency in constructing the Tao palaces was astonishing. Almost every breath was changing, as if one breath was equivalent to a year's worth of hard work. From the seal of the way to the most simple and crude palace of the entry realm, it was quickly upgraded to the small success realm, then to the great success realm, and then to the perfection realm. This was the limit of the palace of the way. The next step was to break through. Now, Chen Zong's 5 great palaces had all been upgraded to the extreme of perfection. Their structures were extremely exquisite, perfect, and powerful. Building the Palace of the Way was a difficult process. It was a gradual improvement, using the most suitable method for oneself to construct it. Different cultivators, even if they were all swordsmen, would have differences in the Palace of the Way they opened up. Every cultivator would make some preparations before breaking through to the fifth realm. In particular, they would study some methods to open up the Palace of the Way. However, the methods of others belonged to others. The reason why they studied was to use others' methods to open up the Palace of the Way as a basis to expand and create their own method of opening up the Palace of the Way. After that, they would gradually perfect it through cultivation and comprehension. Before this, Chen Zong had put in a lot of effort and mastered many methods to open up the Palace of the Way. With the help of his superb comprehension and the Heart Sutra, he had mastered them all. After opening up the Palace of the Way, he had perfected it with astonishing efficiency. Now, he had opened up the Palace of the Perfection Realm directly, saving hundreds or even thousands of years of cultivation time for ordinary Fifth Realm cultivators. However, Chen Zong's breakthrough did not stop there. Instead, he continued to accumulate and comprehend for the next breakthrough. The Great Path was divided into entry, small success, great success, and perfection. The entry level corresponded to the third realm, called the Power of the Way of the Palm, which was to master the power of the Great Path and use it to increase one's own strength. The small success level corresponded to the fourth realm, which was the solidifying seal. The great success level corresponded to the fifth realm, which was the building of the way. In addition, the perfection level corresponded to the top fifth realm, which was the conception of a spirit of the way. In a perfect palace of the perfection level, a spirit of the way would be conceived. When a spirit of the way was conceived and the great path had a spirit, it would be a different level. It was like the difference between an intelligent person and an unintelligent beast. Of course, the conception of a spirit of the way did not mean that the great path would have intelligence. It was just a kind of spirituality. However, this difference was like the difference between an ordinary divine weapon and a Tao divine weapon. Only by conceiving a spirit of the way would there be hope of touching the source of the great path, and then comprehending and mastering the source of the great path to break through to the sixth realm. No one could have predicted that in the process of Chen Zong breaking through from the fourth realm to the fifth realm, not only did he cultivate the Palace of the Way to the perfection level, but he also began to conceive a spirit of the way. The building of the Palace of the Way and conceiving a spirit of the way was not an easy process. Under normal circumstances, the fifth realm would require years or even decades of continuous seclusion to conceive a spirit of the way. During this period, one would try not to fight if possible to avoid delaying the conception of a spirit of the way. After all, the conception of a spirit of the way required the Palace of the Way and the power of the way at its peak. Any loss would bring about adverse effect. However, at this moment, Chen Zong, with the help of the divine power of the universe, took this step and began to conceive a spirit of the way within the 5 great palaces. Time passed slowly. The divine power of the universe was vast and boundless, carrying with it an endless amount of the way and the source of the way, completely enveloping Chen Zong. Not long after, a light appeared within the 5 great palaces. It seemed to have appeared out of thin air. The light emitted traces of indescribable spirituality, constantly absorbing the power of the way within the Palace of the Way to strengthen itself. In just a short time, the power of the way within the 5 great palaces was completely absorbed, but the spirituality only grew a little. There was still a long way to go before it became a true spirit of the way. This was the difficulty of conceiving a spirit of the way. Once the power of the way within the Palace of the Way was completely absorbed, it had to be restored. Only after it was restored could it be absorbed again. This process repeated over and over again. No one knew how many times it had to be repeated before the spirituality could finally grow to its peak and become a true spirit of the way. This had little to do with talent. It had more to do with the environment and resources. In a place where the power of the way was rich, or where there were resources that could quickly restore the power of the way, the speed of conceiving a spirit of the way would be faster. It could be successfully conceived in a few years, and it could take decades to successfully break through. But once a breakthrough was made, the increase in strength would be amazing. Every fifth realm that successfully conceived a spirit of the way was an extremely top fifth realm expert. Among the fifth realm experts in the entire universe, they would be ranked among the top and extraordinary experts. Chernzong was now about to step into this level. Under the cover of the divine power of the universe, the way was extremely rich and had even evolved into the origin. Under such circumstances, the power of the way within Chernzong's 5 great palaces recovered at an astonishing speed. Almost as soon as it was consumed, it was immediately replenished. This caused the spirituality within the 5 great palaces to be in a state of continuous absorption. It was constantly growing stronger and reaching its limit. Improvement. Under the divine power of the universe, Chernzong's breakthrough was a gift from the will of the universe. It made it easier for him to break through, and he was improving in all aspects. Cultivation, swordsmanship, unique skills, way, divine techniques, and so on were all comprehensive. This process lasted for a month. The divine power of the universe that covered 999,999 miles slowly shrank and faded. It was not until 3 days later that it completely disappeared. Chapter 2799. My computer broke down this morning, so I took it to be repaired. It's fine now. Here's the first update. The divine power of the universe, 999,999 miles, finally dissipated. That extremely oppressive aura also dissipated. The universe's chi that surged endlessly like the water of a great river also dissipated. Everything returned to peace. But this was only on the surface. Everyone's heart was not calm. It seemed that when the first person on the Divine Lord list broke through to the 5th realm in the past, there was not such a huge commotion. Potential. Incomparably shocking potential. No one knew how big Chernzong's breakthrough was this time. After breaking through to the 4th realm, it would be the 5th realm. But the 5th realm was a huge realm. The difference in strength was not something that the 4th realm could compare to. After all, the 5th realm contained the great accomplishment and perfection of the Great Path. The 4th realm was only the small accomplishment of the Great Path. The difference was huge. Such a huge breakthrough was enough to prove that the increase in Chernzong's abilities after his breakthrough was definitely extraordinary. However, it was hard to say exactly how much it had increased. It was likely that other than Chernzong, no one else knew. However, there was one thing that was certain, and that was that it was definitely extraordinary. Before his breakthrough, Chernzong's abilities were already comparable to that of a typical 5th realm cultivator. After his breakthrough, his abilities would definitely increase significantly, and he might even reach the peak of 5th realm. Chernzong did not come out of seclusion after breaking through. Instead, he continued to cultivate in seclusion. This was very normal. After breaking through, one's potential would be in a very active state for a period of time. Under such a state, the efficiency of cultivation would be more than 10 times that of normal. Of course, he had to make full use of this period of time to improve himself until his potential recovered and stabilized. There are still about 3 years before the opening of the Dreamless Palace. Chernzong should not miss the time. The Tianguang Peak Lord was very happy. After all, back then, the Dreamless Palace was the greatest benefit that he had obtained for Chernzong. However, due to the interference of the 10th Elder, he had imposed some conditions. Now, these conditions did not seem to be an obstacle. The Tianguang Peak Lord naturally felt a burst of joy from the bottom of his heart. In contrast to the contentment of the Peak Master of Tianguang Peak, the people of Gulan Peak were not in a good mood. They felt disgusted, as if they had swallowed a fly, their expressions terrible. The higher Chen Zong achieved and the more benefits he would obtain, the more upset they would feel. However, they couldn't do anything at the moment. It was difficult to deal with Chen Zong, so they could only wait for the right time. "I hope he stays in seclusion and misses the opportunity," said an elder from the ancient Wave Peak. Chen Zong was still in closed-door training. No one knew how long he would be in closed-door training. Could be a year or 10 years. Time flew by. A year had passed. Chen Zong was still in seclusion. There were still about 2 years before the opening of the Dreamless Palace. 2 years had passed, and Chen Zong was still in seclusion. A few months later, Chen Zong, who was motionless like a statue, suddenly opened his eyes. A bright light shot out of his eyes. The light was so clear that one could see the bottom of the light, but it also had a boundless depth to it. His aura surged, and it was extremely powerful. Under the activation of the terrifying sword intent, it felt like it was going to pierce through the sky. Earlier, when Chen Zong was on the land that was enveloped by death, he witnessed the shocking sword light that split the darkness and the valley apart. He was greatly moved, and the bottleneck of his sword technique and sword Tao was broken because of this. Originally, the power of the Heart Sword Art and the World Sword Art was equivalent to mid-tier Moon-class secret technique. After the breakthrough, they were equivalent to high-tier Moon-class secret technique. Now that they reached level 5, Chen Zong had a deeper understanding of swordsmanship. He was sure that his Heart Sword Art and the World Sword Art had broken through again. They were at least super-tier Moon-class secret techniques now. After that, he could continue to cultivate and comprehend them. It wasn't impossible for him to upgrade them to super-tier Moon-class secret technique. In fact, he might even be able to reach a higher level, Sun-class secret technique. Chen Zong couldn't help but think that he should try his best to upgrade his swordsmanship. After all, there was no limit to swordsmanship. If he could upgrade his swordsmanship to super-tier Sun-class secret techniques, then no one in level 5 would be his match. If he could upgrade his swordsmanship to the level of divine skill, it would be even more terrifying. The power of sword divine skill would be astonishing. With a sword in hand, he could dominate the universe. Of course, Chen Zong knew how difficult it was to upgrade his swordsmanship. After all, his swordsmanship started from the lowest level, and he made breakthroughs again and again. Chen Zong knew how difficult it was to upgrade his swordsmanship. Chen Zong didn't think that it would be difficult to upgrade his swordsmanship to super-tier Moon-class secret technique. Perhaps it wouldn't take him more than a few years. However, it would be difficult to break through the limit and upgrade his swordsmanship to super-tier Moon-class secret technique. Not only did he need to work hard, but he also needed opportunities. Now that he had broken through and his seclusion had ended, Chen Zongdo could feel that his strength was unparalleled. He was still in the second level of the Godly Demon Sword Codex, but his silver sword body and sea-splitting sword energy were more than 10 times more powerful. To be fair, the power of the second level of the Godly Demon Sword Codex could only be fully unleashed at the 5th level. It wasn't comparable to the 4th level, so it was more than 10 times more powerful. Now I only need one finger to kill me before I broke through, Chen Zong muttered to himself and sighed. He couldn't help but think back to the past. If he didn't come to this great universe by chance, he would be in the original void. Even if he broke through and became a dominator, it wouldn't be comparable to now. They were both at the 5th level, but the difference in level and ability was huge. Moreover, in the void, the 5th level was the limit. The road ahead was cut off, and there was no way to improve. However, it was different in the universe. There was still a long way to go beyond the 5th level. It's time to come out. Chen Zong retracted his thoughts and took a step forward. He appeared in front of the door of the secret room, pushed it open, and stepped out. In the next breath, Chen Zong was stunned. Where is this? If his memory served him right, he was still in the secret room behind closed doors a moment ago. He had just pushed open the door of the secret room, intending to come out from behind closed doors and meet the peak master of Tianguang. Unexpectedly, in the next breath, it wasn't the familiar scene in front of him, but a road. This road extended straight ahead. He didn't know where it extended to, and it seemed to have no end. The road was white, as if it was paved with white jade. It had an indescribable smoothness, and it seemed to emit a faint halo. It wasn't dazzling, but it had an indescribable gentleness. The white jade road wasn't wide. It was only about 1 meter wide. There were lines of engravings on it. If one looked closely, one would find that they were like sword edges, pointing straight ahead. On both sides of the white jade road, there were endless clouds and fog. It was like an endless sea of clouds, bottomless and mysterious. Chen Zong was very sure that this was definitely not Tianguang Peak. There was no such place on Tianguang Peak. An illusion? Someone had set up an illusion outside the secret room behind closed doors. As a result, the moment he walked out of the secret room behind closed doors, he was immediately trapped in the illusion. Then, who could it be? This was Tianguang Peak of Taihao Mountain, which was guarded by a sword saint, who could sneak in and set up an illusion. If they had such ability, why did they have to do this? They could have eliminated him directly. Then, was it the doing of a powerhouse of Taihao Mountain? This was Tianguang Peak. The Tianguang Peak Lord could be considered a top 7th realm cultivator. In addition, there were many 7th realm powerhouses guarding Tianguang Peak. It wasn't easy to sneak in and set up an illusion. At the very least, one had to have the strength of a 7th realm cultivator, and an extraordinary one at that. But then again, if such a powerful 7th realm cultivator wanted to deal with him, he didn't have to resort to using an illusion. Thinking quickly, Chen Zong thought of many things in an instant and made many analyses. But in the end, he couldn't come to a correct conclusion. What about now? If this was really an illusion, how could he see through it? Chen Zong raised his energy and spirit to the extreme, and also raised his perception to the extreme. He carefully sensed everything around him, but he couldn't find anything wrong. Any illusion was a kind of deceit. It could deceive one's perception, and so on. In order to see through it, one had to start from there. Relying on one's spirit and the strength of one's spirit, ordinary illusions would not be able to do anything to oneself. Even if it was some advanced illusions, one could still sense that something was wrong and leave behind some clues. After carefully analyzing and sensing, Chen Zong didn't feel anything wrong at all. Then, he directly unleashed his sword will. The extremely powerful sword will soared into the sky, as if it was going to shatter everything. Before the breakthrough, Chen Zong's sword will had already been raised to a very high level. It was stronger than an ordinary 5th realm sword cultivator, and it was comparable to a top 5th realm sword cultivator. Of course, top 5th realm was also a term that covered a range. There were still differences in strength. Chen Zong didn't know what level his sword will had reached, but he was sure that it was definitely many times stronger than before the breakthrough. Even with such an explosive sword will, it still didn't affect him at all. Could it be that this isn't an illusion? Chen Zong couldn't help but frown. There were only two possibilities. Either this wasn't an illusion, so no matter how he tried, he couldn't find anything wrong with it. Or, this was an extremely high-level illusion that was beyond the level Chen Zong could reach, so Chen Zong couldn't sense anything wrong. No matter which it was, Chen Zong had to treat it seriously. Chen Zong stared ahead. He could vaguely see that the path curved and extended endlessly. Let's go. There's no need to hesitate. You'll eventually see me after you cross this sword path. Very suddenly, a low voice sounded. It seemed to come from all directions, but it also seemed to ring directly in Chen Zong's mind. Instantly, Chen Zong was stunned. "You'll eventually see me?" "See who?" Chen Zong was in a daze, but his mind was working at an astonishing speed. He suddenly thought of something, an extremely shocking thing. If it was true, then this time, Chen Zong's heart couldn't help but beat wildly. Chapter 2800. Here comes the second update. The White Jade Sword Road was only about a meter wide. It looked like it was going straight, but it was actually winding like a snake. It was surrounded by a vast sea of clouds. It was bottomless and boundless, and it was magnificent. A figure was running at high speed. His footsteps were like the wind, and he kept moving forward on the White Jade Sword Road. It was Chen Zong. Filled with excitement and anticipation, Chen Zong kept running at high speed. A fourth realm expert could fly in the air. A fifth realm expert could do the same, and they could be even faster. However, Chen Zong also realized that he could not fly in the air at all. He could only keep running on the White Jade Sword Road. Go, go, go! The Celestial Demon Sword Manual gave Chen Zong an extremely powerful physique and cultivation strength. It was extremely powerful and vast, and Chen Zong's endurance was incomparable. He would not feel tired even if he ran for long distances. Moreover, his cultivation technique was constantly circulating, and it automatically absorbed the vitality around him to replenish his energy. As long as he did not consume too much of his energy, he could always be in a state of circulation. However, Chen Zong soon realized that his energy was being consumed, and it was very difficult to recover it. Even if the Celestial Demon Sword Manual was constantly circulating, he could only absorb a small amount of vitality to recover his energy. It could not keep up with the speed of his energy consumption. Even if Chen Zong consciously slowed down and reduced his energy consumption, it was the same. His recovery speed could not keep up with the speed of his energy consumption. Moreover, once his speed was reduced, Chen Zong felt as if he would be annihilated. It seemed that if he was not fast enough, some terrifying giant beast would appear behind him and swallow him whole. However, when he turned his head to look, there was nothing behind him, there was nothing. However, the strong sense of danger was still there. When he was fast, the sense of danger would weaken. When he slowed down, the sense of danger would increase. This spurred Chen Zong to maintain a certain speed. To save energy consumption as much as possible and maintain a certain speed, Chen Zong needed to improve his control of his own energy. However, Chen Zong's control over his own strength had already reached an astonishing level. It was something that countless Fifth Realm cultivators could not compare to. It was not an easy task to further enhance his strength. Chen Zong was not in a hurry. His mind was calm and unperturbed. While maintaining a high speed, he focused his mind and tempered his control of power. With the help of the Heart Sutra, Chen Zong gained something every moment. Although the gains were very small, they accumulated over time. Chen Zong also noticed that the White Jade Sword path was not straight but curved. For example, Chen Zong could see the White Jade Sword path above his head. In reality, his head was facing down, but the White Jade Sword path seemed to have a suction force that prevented him from falling. Straight, left and right, up and down, spiral. Suddenly, a gust of wind swept over. The gust of wind carried an astonishing sharpness. It seemed to be formed by sword chi. With a whistling sound, it locked onto Chen Zong and bombarded him with a force that could destroy the world. Chen Zong's expression changed. This was the first time he had encountered such a situation on the White Jade Sword path. The power of the sword chi storm was so terrifying that it made Chen Zong tremble in fear. He could only dodge. In an instant, Chen Zong's figure drifted. As a phantom appeared, he dodged the sword chi storm. However, the White Jade Sword path was only a meter wide. After dodging the sword chi storm, Chen Zong could not avoid being separated from the white jade sword path. His figure paused slightly and was about to fall into the endless sea of clouds. In the face of danger, Chen Zong did not panic. He stamped his feet repeatedly. The sword energy of the sea-splitting sword burst out through the soles of his feet and stepped into the void. In an instant, the void seemed to have become solid. As Chen Zong stamped his feet 3 times in a row, a force shook up and pushed Chen Zong's body to the white jade sword path. He landed on the white jade sword path again and continued to run. Not long after, Chen Zong encountered another obstacle. This time, it was not the sword chi storm, but countless sword chi that bombarded him directly from the front. Each sword chi condensed a terrifying power that could penetrate everything. It seemed that it would directly smash Chen Zong into pieces. Chen Zong looked solemn. He could not avoid it. Hundreds of sword chi bombarded him directly from the front and covered a very wide area. However, the white jade sword path was only a meter wide. Coupled with the special environment, Chen Zong knew that he could not avoid it. Once he avoided it, he would be separated from the white jade sword path. It would be very difficult for him to step back in the air again. The 3 steps just now seemed simple, but Chen Zong knew clearly how difficult it was. Moreover, those 3 steps directly consumed a lot of his cultivation power. In that case, he would just chop it. Without stopping, he unsheathed the Guiyue sword in an instant. It drew a sharp sword light like a crescent moon. In an instant, the sword chi was vast and mighty. The silver-white sword light seemed to split the void and directly collided with the sword chi that was bombarding him. Chop, chop, chop. If he did not chop it, he would not be able to break it. Otherwise, he would not be able to break through the sword chi. The sense of danger behind him was also constantly approaching. Unconsciously, it seemed that essence, chi, and spirit had been integrated into the sword. The sword light became more and more powerful. After cutting through the sword chi, Chen Zong took a step forward. His body was as sharp as a sword, but as flexible as a fish. He easily passed through the gaps of the sword chi. He did not touch the other sword chi and was not attacked. Go, go, go! Behind him, there was an invisible threat. Chen Zong didn't know what kind of danger he would face if he slowed down or even stopped. He also didn't know if that danger would truly threaten his life. These were all things that he couldn't predict. He couldn't gamble on luck. If he failed, the result would be death. Chen Zong would not gamble on something that he had no confidence in. He did not want to gamble. Instead, he wanted to fight for a chance of survival for himself. This chance of survival was to keep rushing forward and running. However, how long was the white jade sword path? There was no end in sight. It was fine for a short time, but if it went on for a long time without an end, it was enough to affect people's minds and eventually make them collapse. Even Chen Zong was no exception. Now, Chen Zong was running continuously, his eyes sharp and determined. A sword practitioner should have no distracting thoughts. He should press forward with indomitable will. Time passed slowly. Chen Zong kept running. His strength was constantly consumed. He had less than half of his strength left. From time to time, various kinds of sword chi would attack Chen Zong and threaten him. Chen Zong had to deal with it, either by dodging or breaking through it head-on. He broke through the obstacles and continued to move forward. Chen Zong was in an indescribable state of tension. His essence, chi, spirit, and mind were tense. This kind of tension was helpful for the mobilization and application of his strength. A clear and transparent sword heart pressed forward with indomitable will. Obstacles and tribulations were all part of tempering. This seemingly endless sword path was also training. Chen Zong told himself this, but as time passed, he inevitably felt a little irritated. Why hadn't he reached the end yet? The voice from before was probably not a hallucination, but the reason why he had gone to Taihao Mountain. Even though time had passed and his continuous cultivation had improved, and his desire to go there had lessened, Chern Zong still hadn't forgotten his original goal. What's more, that was a sword principal saint. If he could meet a sword saint and receive his guidance, it would be a great opportunity. In order to obtain such an opportunity, he had risked his life to leave Wanyuan Island. During that time, he had been chased by the sky-splitting Sword Emperor and had almost died. He had escaped into the space crack and narrowly escaped death. He had passed through the chaotic territory and encountered many life and death crises. In the end, he had arrived at Mount Taihao, passed the assessment, and become a disciple of Mount Taihao. He had not done all of this for nothing. He had reaped quite a lot of rewards. These rewards were equivalent to his own wealth, his own accumulation. If he had something to rely on, he would not be like a rootless duckweed. He would not be lost easily. If he had a goal, he would be more determined. The more determined he was, the more elite he would be. Unknowingly, under the circumstances that even Chern Zong himself didn't notice, his sword heart was being tempered time and time again, and it became even more tenacious, transparent, and capable of seeing through all illusions and defeating all bewilderment, and it wasn't deceived by external forces. Swinging the sword. Unknowingly, the sword light had become more and more condensed. Every stroke seemed to be able to cut through everything. All the power of essence, qi, and spirit condensed on it. Every slash of the sword carried an extremely shocking might. However, the power within every slash was completely restrained. It was extremely condensed and did not leak outwards. As a result, it was even harder for people to sense the power contained within the sword, making it even harder to defend against. All this seemed to be done unconsciously. Chern Zong himself did not notice it. Because at this moment, Chern Zong was constantly moving forward, swinging his sword, and repeating the same thing. His whole mind and will were immersed in a wonderful state. A pair of eyes were watching Chern Zong. They were observing Chern Zong's every move and reaction. That pair of eyes was like the eyes of a god. They were high up and could see through everything. Unknowingly, Chern Zong did not notice the passage of time. Suddenly, a figure appeared in front of him. The figure seemed to be transparent, but at the same time, it was not. It held a long sword and stood tall in front of Chern Zong, blocking his advance. Kill. Without any hesitation, Chern Zong's arm shook and his wrist twisted. In an instant, the sword light with unparalleled sharpness pierced through the sky and arrived before him in an instant. In the air, there seemed to be a sharp whistling sound, but it was very faint. It was so faint that it was difficult to hear it with one's ears. However, the whistling sound of the sword was heard. It seemed to be everywhere, directly attacking the divine will. With only one stroke, the sword-wielding figure in front of him was defeated before he could react. Immediately, the second sword-wielding figure appeared. It was also defeated by Chern Zong with one stroke. One after another, sword-wielding silhouettes appeared, but they were all defeated by Chern Zong one after another. However, the later the sword-wielding silhouettes appeared, the better their swordsmanship was, and the stronger their strength was. Chern Zong was no longer able to defeat them with a single sword strike. Instead, he fell into a bitter battle. The bitter fight was also a form of training. Like a whetstone, it constantly sharpened the sword edge, making it even sharper and more amazing. Chapter 28:01. It was like a dream, an endless dream. In the dream, he had been running non-stop, as if he was running on an endless road. No matter how hard he ran, he couldn't run to the end. He couldn't stop, it would be a disaster. Then, there were all kinds of sword qi intercepting him, which caused great obstacles, but they were all broken by Chern Zong one by one. It was very dangerous. Finally, there were enemies. Along the way, all the enemies were holding swords. They blocked the seemingly narrow road and waved their swords at him, showing amazing and incomparably exquisite swordsmanship. Kill, kill, kill. Chen Zong did not know how far he had run, how many obstacles he had broken, how many times he had waved his sword, and how many opponents he had killed. It was like a dream, and now he had woken up. As soon as he woke up, Chen Zong found that in front of him were pavilions and waterside pavilions. The sound of spring water entered his ears, the white clouds were leisurely, and the mountains were far away and close to the water. What a beautiful scenery! After waking up in an instant, Chen Zong immediately felt that the Numa here was rich and pure, reaching an amazing height. Moreover, the aura of the Great Way here was also very rich, so rich that Chen Zong was very surprised. In particular, the aura of the Way of the Sword shocked Chen Zong. It was comparable to the level of the divine power of the universe. In addition to the aura of the Way of the Sword, there was also a mighty and magnificent true gang spirit. That aura seemed to be full of destructive overbearingness, but also contained an indescribable vitality. Chen Zong's eyes narrowed, and his heart skipped a beat. He remembered that when the army of the dead invaded the land of death, the sword light that split the endless darkness was lingering with the intertwining of destruction and rebirth, as well as the majestic and domineering aura of the true sun that could drive away evil. "Have you finished watching?" Very suddenly, a voice sounded. That voice was as gentle as a breeze, but with a trace of deep and indescribable overbearingness and gloominess. Chen Zong was shocked and looked over. He didn't know when, but a figure in a light golden robe had appeared in front of him. His long silver hair seemed to be dyed by the golden light of the sun. He emitted an incomparably shocking sword aura, as vast as the true sun. This was a middle-aged man. His appearance seemed very ordinary, but at the same time, he didn't seem ordinary at all. Chen Zong found that he couldn't use words to describe this man's appearance and temperament. This man had already transcended the level of humans. He was like a god. His eyes were like two true suns that emitted endless light and heat, as if they could burn the world, the void, and all things. Being stared at, Chen Zong felt as if everything about him had been seen through, leaving him with nowhere to hide. The disciple of Tianguang Peak, Chen Zong, greets the senior master. Chen Zong straightened his back like a sword and saluted with a solemn face. Because in his heart, Chen Zong had already guessed it. Back then, I sent you a message and gave you 100 years. Now, in less than 100 years, you are qualified to stand in front of me. Not bad. The middle-aged man in the golden robe nodded and smiled slightly, as if he was praising Chen Zong. Chen Zong couldn't help but feel excited. Although he had already guessed it, he still felt very shocked when it was confirmed. A saint of sword principle. The man in front of him was the saint who left him a message at the Xinfeng brothel on Wanyuan Island. It was that message that led him to come to Taihao Mountain at the risk of life and death. He had also experienced many battles in Taihao Mountain to improve his strength and status, all in order to achieve his goal at that time. Now, he finally achieved his goal, standing in front of this saint. Chen Zong thought he would be very excited and overjoyed, but after a moment of excitement, he calmed down and returned to calmness. It seemed to be natural. Such a change in mentality was closely related to the endless path of white jade swords that seemed to be in a dream. That experience seemed to be in a dream, but it had greatly improved Chen Zong's state of mind. His sword heart was pure, clear, and bright, so it was not confused. Even if he really met a saint of sword principle, he would not show too much emotion. He would only be a little excited, but he would soon return to calmness. I am the sword saint of this generation of Taihao Mountain. The middle-aged man spoke again. I am the third sword saint of Taihao. Chen Zong was slightly excited, but not very excited. His mind was calm, and his sword heart was bright. Sword saint of Taihao. The strongest swordsman of Taihao Mountain, the strongest being who suppressed the universe with his sword. Disciple of Tianguang Peak, Chen Zong greets Sword Saint of Taihao. Chen Zong saluted with his sword again. Since you can walk on the endless path of swords and come in front of me, I will give you a chance. It is also a test. Sword Saint of Taihao said very directly. As soon as he finished speaking, Sword Saint of Taihao put his fingers together like a sword and gently swiped forward. In an instant, a sword mark appeared on the mountain wall as white as jade in front of him. The sword mark was about a meter long, and it looked simple, as if it was made by a casual swing of the sword. At least, that was what Chen Zong felt at first sight. But was it really so? This was the sword mark left by Sword Saint of Taihao, the strongest swordsman of Taihao Mountain. Even if it was just a simple sword mark, it contained an indescribable secret of sword principle. When Chen Zong came back to his senses, he found that Sword Saint of Taihao had disappeared without him noticing. He came without a sound and left without a sound. It was unfathomable. However, Sword Saint of Taihao had said before that he would give Chen Zong a chance. This chance was the sword mark on the jade mountain wall in front of him. It was not only a chance but also a test. It was a test given by Sword Saint of Taihao. So, he began to comprehend it. Chen Zong's figure flashed and appeared in front of the jade-like mountain wall. His eyes stared at the 1-meter-long sword mark. The sword mark looked ordinary, as if there was nothing special about it. However, Chen Zong did not relax because of this. Instead, he became even more focused. He gathered his energy and spirit and operated the one-hearted mantra. Everything was activated to the extreme, and he focused on the sword mark. It was as if they were separated by layers of time and space. In a pavilion, Sword Saint of Taihao stared at Chen Zong while drinking wine. Another person was sitting opposite Sword Saint of Taihao. It was the first elder of Taihao Mountain. Both of them were saint-level experts. It is his great fortune to be noticed by the saint, the first elder said with a smile as he looked at Chen Zong. He was talking to the Sword Saint of Taihao. This boy has extraordinary talent in swordsmanship. He is worth training. Sword Saint of Taihao smiled. Are you going to train him like the fourth Sword Saint of Taihao? The first elder could not help but ask. Somewhat, but whether he can achieve it depends on his ability. Sword Saint of Taihao smiled again. The fourth Sword Saint of Taihao. Who was the fourth Sword Saint of Taihao? Of course, he was referring to the fourth Sword Saint of Taihao. Taihao Mountain was founded by the first Sword Saint of Taihao. Of course, there was no Sword Saint of Taihao in the beginning. However, as the founder of Taihao Mountain broke through to the saint level, Taihao Mountain became a holy land. It continued to develop, pass down, and grow until today. After the first Sword Saint of Taihao trained the second Sword Saint of Taihao, he left Taihao Mountain to explore the universe. After the second Sword Saint of Taihao trained the third Sword Saint of Taihao, he followed in the footsteps of the first Sword Saint of Taihao to explore the universe. Now, the third Sword Saint of Taihao was planning to do the same. He wanted to train an heir and follow in the footsteps of the first two Sword Saints to explore the universe. Why did he do that? Of course, it was because the universe was boundless, mysterious, and worthy of exploration. Even a saint-level expert could not guarantee that he could see through all the mysteries of the universe. The universe was divided into 4 layers, and the core layer was even more intricate. Previously, the third Sword Saint of Taihao had paid attention to some outstanding disciples and even indirectly gave them some opportunities. Unfortunately, none of them met his standards. Just then, the wind of the universe blew. He wanted to see if he could find some talented swordsman who could catch his eye. As a result, he saw Chen Zong. At that time, Chen Zong was only pleasing to the eye. But Sword Saint of Taihao was not particularly satisfied with Chen Zong. Nevertheless, Sword Saint of Taihao still gave Chen Zong a chance. First, he intercepted the other saint-level experts who had their eyes on Chen Zong so that they could not take Chen Zong away. Then, he set a test for Chen Zong. It was very difficult to pass, almost impossible, but Chen Zong did it. This gave Sword Saint of Taihao more ideas. He might as well give Chen Zong some opportunities. For Sword Saint of Taihao, these opportunities were just a matter of convenience. It was both an opportunity and a test. For example, although the sword scar was just a simple sword scar casually left by Sword Saint of Taihao, it should be noted that he was a powerful sword saint. With his sword, he defeated countless supreme existences in the universe. His understanding of swordsmanship had reached an unparalleled level. Swordsmanship was the return to simplicity. A sword scar casually left behind contained the profound mysteries of swordsmanship. For other saint-level experts, it was nothing. For the powerful Jiandi, it might not be a big deal. But for Chen Zong, the mysteries of swordsmanship were unfathomable. No one knew how much time and energy it would take for him to comprehend them. This was an opportunity that contained Sword Saint of Taihao's understanding of the mysteries of swordsmanship. It was also a test to see how long it would take for Chen Zong to comprehend the mysteries. The length of time and the level of the mysteries he comprehended were related to Sword Saint of Taihao's evaluation of Chen Zong. If he was not satisfied, Sword Saint of Taihao would naturally not pay attention to Chen Zong. As for opportunities, even if they were readily available, he would not give them to him. As for the fourth Sword Saint of Taihao, he would not even think about it. Although Chen Zong did not know this, for Chen Zong, such an opportunity was rare. Because Chen Zong had already comprehended a trace of the mysteries of swordsmanship from this sword scar. Immersed. Chen Zong was directly immersed in the mysteries of the sword scar. In this sword scar, the mysteries of swordsmanship were just a general name. In fact, there were also mysteries of swordsmanship. With the help of his superb comprehension, the help of the Heart Sutra, and his solid foundation of swordsmanship, Chen Zong quickly entered the state and comprehended a trace of the mysteries of the sword scar. Just a trace of the mysteries made Chen Zong feel as if he had fallen into a vast ocean of swordsmanship, wandering and roaming freely. You're tuning into the Phoenix Knights YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.